Chapter 377 Unknown. Chapter 377 Unknown. Sherfone stared at Charlin's information, dumbfounded by what he saw. From a level 8 NPC in Redleaf Town, Charlin had first jumped to become a level 20 Tier 3 Divine Official. Then she grew from a level 20 Tier 3 Divine Official to a level 180 Tier 3 Divine Official. Now, she had grown even further, becoming a level 200 Tier 4 Great Divine Official. She was now on the same level as the Tier 4 Wizard, Weissman. Lady Charlin, I heard that you have been looking for me. May I know how I may be of service to you? Sherfone reluctantly asked after calming down. Whenever Sherfone encountered Charlin, he feared for his wallet. It was especially true when Charlin revealed that saintly smile of hers. Sherfone suddenly felt that he had come to the wrong place. If he had known that he would meet Charlin here, he would have definitely gone to Starmoon City instead. I do have something I need you to help me with, but this matter can only be addressed inside the Weeping Moon Pavilion. Unfortunately, the Weeping Moon Pavilion does not permit entry to outsiders. You should know that I am taking a big risk by allowing you in. Seeing as we are acquaintances, I can help you pay half of the 1,000 gold security deposit, but you will have to pay the remaining 500 gold yourself. Otherwise, these black-robed knights will escort you out. Even I am helpless about this rule. Charlin sighed and shrugged, a helpless look on her face. Sherfone immediately cast a scornful glare at Charlin. Again. She was trying to take his money again. This was the first time he had heard about a security deposit for entering the Weeping Moon Pavilion. He had only brought around 700 gold with him this time. Yet, in just a moment, Charlin had relieved him of 500 gold. However, even though Sherfeng's heart ached, he had no choice but to pay. Before Charlin, Sherfone was like a helpless little boy. Charlin's senses were simply too sharp, and she would sniff out his weaknesses every time they met. This time as well, in order to find 3 Tier 4 NPCs to help him, he had to enter the Weeping Moon Pavilion no matter what. Although he had other plans he could use to try to enter the Weeping Moon Pavilion, there was no guarantee that those plans would succeed. Moreover, those plans would demand a lot of his time. Reluctantly, Sherfone took 500 gold coins from his bag and handed them over to Charlin. Why are you looking at me like that? This is only a security deposit. It's not like you won't get it back, Charlin said. At this moment, her eyes were completely glued to the glittering gold coins in Sherfeng's hands. With a slight wave of her delicate finger, the gold coins flew into her pocket. Inwardly, Sherfeng flipped her off. Since this is a security deposit, why are you pocketing the money instead of the administrator of the Stargazing Tower? As if having read Sherfeng's thoughts, Charlin smiled faintly as she took out a Silvermoon emblem and pinned it to her chest. The words carved onto this Silvermoon emblem were, Stargazing Tower Administrator. Damn! Just how many jobs does she have? When Sherfeng saw the Silvermoon emblem on Charlin's chest, Sherfeng understood one thing. He would never see that 500 gold again. There was not even a trace of hope of getting his money back. In which case, he had not just paid a security deposit, but an entrance fee. Moreover, it was an entrance fee of 500 gold. Humph, little dummy, did you really think that I'd lie to you? Charlin tapped the Silvermoon emblem on her chest, chuckling. All right, let's go, then. Sighing helplessly, Sherfeng followed Charlin up the pavilion. As for the sword in the stone, it would not be too late to ask for Charlin's help after accepting her quest. The second floor of the Weeping Moon Pavilion consisted of a single wide corridor with many tightly locked rooms. It looked like an apartment complex. Massive stone doors loomed at the end of the corridor. Numerous images were carved onto the stone doors, and each image carried its own meaning and story. Charlin pointed towards the distant stone doors, smiling as she said, Beyond those doors lie the deepest secret of the Stargazing Tower. Do you want to go in and have a look? Can I? Sherfeng had always been curious about the Stargazing Tower. In God's domain, any monument that survived the ancient era was a massive treasure, not to mention a monument that had survived the Great Destruction. If a player could explore the secrets hidden beyond those stone doors, their path towards godhood would definitely become much easier. Unfortunately, Shifeng had not been strong enough in the past, and he simply had not qualified to explore the secrets beyond those doors. Of course not. I should remind you that, without sufficient strength, you are better off not knowing certain things. Just like how you opened the entrance to the endless abyss. Now, not only do you carry a stigmata on your body, but you also plan to gather the 7 treasures. You are looking to get yourself killed. Do you know how many years the War God's Temple has spent trying to gather those treasures? Meanwhile, you haven't even obtained your Tier 1 class. Do you think it is even possible for you to accomplish something the War God's Temple cannot? They are only trying to. Forget it. There are some things you are better off not knowing. Charlene sighed as she looked at Shifeng, emotions such as pity and anger filling her eyes. Suddenly, Shifeng realized that Charlene was a unique NPC. It was no longer a matter just high intelligence. Charlene was almost human. Following which, Charlene led Shifeng to her own room. Charlene's room was very simple. Other than a place to rest, bookshelves covered the remainder of her room. Rare, ancient books crowded the shelves, all of which would normally be impossible to find anywhere else. Sit. Charlene made a wave with her finger. In the next moment, a wooden chair appeared behind Shifeng. I've called you here because I have something I need you to do for me. People such as myself cannot complete this particular task. Only heaven-blessed individuals like you can accomplish it. However, this task is extremely dangerous. Will you accept it? Of course, if you do, I can give you a chance to obtain an advanced legacy. This would help your growth immensely in the future. If you can complete this task, I can even make you the lord of a city. You will possess your very own fiefdom. Charlene's words stunned Shifeng into a silence. He could obtain an advanced legacy just by accepting the quest. Moreover, if he could complete the quest, he could even become the lord of a city. Just what rank was this quest? System, do you wish to accept Charlene's unknown quest? It seems that I won't know anything about the quest if I don't accept it. Shifeng felt uncertain when he saw Charlene's grave expression and the unknown quest. Shifeng was very clear about the iron law of God's domain. Equivalent exchange. The greater the risk, the greater the reward would be. The advanced legacy alone was no trivial matter, let alone the reward of becoming the lord of a city. Although he could afford to ignore the advanced legacy, the reward was something he could not ignore. Opportunity seldom knocks twice. It was now or never. The term, becoming the lord of a city, did not mean that players would be allowed to take control of a city controlled by NPCs such as White River City. To begin with, these NPC cities would never accept the rule of players. When Charlene spoke of becoming the lord of a city, it meant that she would reward Shifeng with his own fiefdom, qualifying him to establish his own city. Normally, when a guild wished to establish their own city, it would first need to capture a town not governed by any kingdom or empire. The second option was starting it from scratch and establishing a town from nothing. However, that was much more difficult, and the resources needed would also be several times higher than if the guild just captured a town. On the bright side, the guild could determine the location and geographic advantages of the town. Meanwhile, once they obtained a town, a guild would have to develop the town over a long period before it could become a city. Moreover, the conditions for a town's promotion to become a city were numerous and very demanding. However, Charlene's reward would allow Shifeng to establish a city directly, eliminating many of the challenges one would normally face. Chapter 378 Immortal Crown. Chapter 378 Immortal Crown. A city completely under his control. This was a dream for Zero Wing. Shifeng had once led Shadow, a guild that owned 10 city-states, so he knew how valuable and how great the advantages were for owning his own city. Although Zero Wing was developing well at the moment, its lack of a stable source of income for credits was a major flaw. Other first-rate and second-rate guilds had support from wealthy corporations. These corporations would provide funding to their partnered guilds, allowing these guilds to develop steadily without worrying about a shortage of credits. Although Shifeng had many ways to earn coins in God's domain, it was not easy to support a guild with coins alone. Moreover, along with the guild's development and the influx of new members, its demand for coins would increase as well. Converting large sums of coins into credits was not a suitable long-term plan to develop a guild. However, it would be a different story if Cherfong possessed a city of his own. Why were large corporations willing to invest so many credits into a guild? Wasn't it to earn money? However, how were they going to earn money? The answer was a player-established autonomous city. If a guild possessed an autonomous city, it could start seeking investors to rent out shops and such in its city. Through these investors, the guild could then earn a large amount of credits and coins, thereby solving the problems of the guild's future development. Thus, Cherfong was determined to obtain the rights to establish his own city. Even if he had to pay a huge price in the process, he would. After a moment of silence, Cherfong answered, "Lady Charlene, I accept your conditions." "Good. I really did not choose the wrong person. Since you've agreed, the contract between us will be established from this moment onward." Charlene nodded and drew a silver rune in midair. She then imprinted the rune on the back of Cherfeng's hand and said, "This is a spirit seal, and it can be used to absorb immortal souls. What I want you to do is to collect 10,000 immortal souls." "Collect immortal souls?" Cherfong said, unable to suppress his shock. "You want me to kill 10,000 heaven-blessed individuals?" When NPCs spoke of heaven-blessed individuals, they were referring to players. Players were immortal existences in God's domain, and they could resurrect infinitely at the cost of some levels and EXP. This was all due to the souls of players being immortal. Meanwhile, Cherfong could only obtain the immortal soul from the corpse of a player. Moreover, Cherfong needed to meet a few requirements before he could absorb the immortal soul of another player. First, he could not be 5 levels higher or lower than the target player. Second, he needed to kill the target player personally. Lastly, upon the target player's death, the distance between Cherfong and the player could not exceed 10 yards. If he failed to meet any of these conditions, he would not absorb the player's immortal soul. For the NPCs of God's domain, absorbing the immortal souls of heaven-blessed individuals was taboo. If Cherfong were discovered doing so, no one, NPCs or players, would hold back from killing him. As to why players would try to kill Cherfong as well, it was because any players who lost their immortal souls would be barred from logging into the game for a long time. It was a punishment more severe than the penalty for death. Hence, there was no leeway for Cherfong if he were caught in the act. "I never thought you would know about immortal souls." "That's right. I require you to kill heaven-blessed individuals and collect their immortal souls," Charlene stated, slightly surprised that Cherfong actually knew about immortal souls. However, she had not planned to hide this fact, to begin with. "I know that I am making things very difficult for you by requesting such a thing, but we cannot repair the immortal crown without immortal souls." The immortal crown was originally a divine artifact used to suppress all evil beings. However, the crown was damaged the last time it was used to suppress the endless abyss. Meanwhile, the stargazing tower has already collected the other materials required to repair the immortal crown, and right now, we are only missing immortal souls. Initially, I called you here to help me collect immortal souls gradually. However, I had not expected the endless abyss to escape its confinement so soon. The endless abyss is simply too powerful. Without the immortal crown, we have no chance of resisting the invasion of the endless abyss. Since you started this scourge naturally, you will have to take responsibility for it. In order to repair the immortal crown quickly, we need a large number of immortal souls. However, I do not want others to know of this, so I have no choice but to ask you to complete this task by yourself. The magic array that keeps the endless abyss in place will not last long. By my estimation, it will hold out for another 3 months. In 3 months, we will have no choice but to face the endless abyss directly. Hence, you must collect 10,000 immortal souls within that time. However, it won't be easy, which is why I asked you to meet me here. There are many legacies within the stargazing tower. As long as you can pass the test of one of those legacies, you will have a much easier time collecting the immortal souls. System, you have accepted the epic hidden quest. Immortal Crown. Quest details: you are required to collect 10,000 immortal souls within 3 months. If you fail to do so, your soul will be cursed and barred from logging into God's domain for 1 month. In addition, your soul will enter a weakened state for 3 months, decreasing your attributes by 90% during this period. Shifeng's head started to ache after reading this quest notification. To put it simply, failure meant hell. Failing this quest would deal a heavy blow. If he could not log into God's domain for a month, just how far would he fall behind? Also, even after he could log back into God's domain, with all of his attributes decreased by 90%, how was he even supposed to play the game? With your current level, you already qualify to accept an advanced legacy. Will you the advanced legacies trial right now, or do you wish to challenge it after taking some time to prepare? Charlene asked patiently as she watched Shifeng. Oh, I should remind you that advanced legacies are extremely precious. Even with my status, I can only give you 1 chance. You must be careful. If you are not confident in succeeding, it is best to challenge it at another time. The trial of an advanced legacy is no less difficult than an epic quest. If you think that an advanced legacy will be too difficult for you, I can offer an intermediate legacy. Not only will the difficulty decrease, but you will also have 3 chances to complete it. Charlene explained the options patiently. Shifeng understood her intentions. In God's domain, a class change was the equivalent of obtaining the legacy of a higher-tiered class. Meanwhile, a majority of the players in God's domain would normally receive their class change quest from the class association in their respective city. By doing so, players would be challenging basic legacies. Intermediate legacies were 1 rank above basic legacies. Intermediate legacies were relatively rare in God's domain, and normally, these legacies allowed players to obtain a common hidden class. Advanced legacies were 1 rank higher. Advanced legacies were extremely rare, and players could take on a rare, hidden class. Astromancer was one of these rare, hidden classes. Peak legacies were 1 rank higher than advanced legacies. In God's domain, peak legacies were like phoenix's feathers. Even the stargazing tower should not possess such a legacy. In Shifeng's decade of playing God's domain, he had only seen a few people obtain peak legacies. After giving it some thought, Shifeng said earnestly, Lady Charlene, can I pass this chance to another person? To Shifeng, an advanced legacy held little significance. After all, he possessed the sword in the stone, a legacy item containing a peak legacy. How could he give up on a peak legacy to accept an advanced legacy? Chapter 379 Awaken. Chapter 379 Awaken. Shifeng's question stunned Charlene. She looked at Shifeng, surprise flashing in her beautiful eyes. What were advanced legacies? A heaven-blessed individual could only come across an opportunity like this if they were lucky. They'd never find an advanced legacy by searching alone. Even if one tried to trade 10 epic items, they could never afford it. Even she, the manager of the Stargazing Tower, had paid a massive price to obtain this 1 chance to challenge an advanced legacy. Yet Shifeng wanted to give this precious chance to someone else. The legacies of the Stargazing Tower cannot be passed to others. If you do not wish to accept the legacy, I can give you an epic item as compensation instead, Charlene said, shaking her head. The words epic item were tempting. However, Shifeng was not satisfied. Lady Charlene, may I exchange the advanced legacy for a favor from you? Shifeng asked once more. A favor? Charlene grinned. Chuckling, she said, Little dummy, do you know how valuable an advanced legacy is? And you want to trade it for a favor? Don't tell me you want Big Sister to. Looking at Charlene's blushing cheeks, sweat streamed down Shifeng's forehead. Hurriedly he said, Don't get the wrong idea. You mustn't misunderstand me. I only want you to awaken an item for me. Only Tier 4 classes can awaken it. Awaken an item? Charlene was suddenly interested. She then focused on Shifeng, thoroughly scanning his body from top to bottom. Her eyes widened in surprise when her gaze landed on the bag hanging from Shifeng's waist. With a teasing laugh, she said, I don't see anything on your body that needs to be awakened, though. You can't be asking me to wake that withered dragon hanging from your waist, right? Based on Charlin's comment, Sherfone had finally confirmed something. Charlin could see the contents of his bag. This was how Charlin could always squeeze him dry every time they met. HM? She hasn't discovered it? Sherfone felt that something amiss when he saw Charlin's ridiculing smile. Since she could see the contents of his bag, why didn't she discover the extraordinary power within the sword and the stone? If a Tier 0 player like himself could see it, how could a Tier 4 great divine official not? Thus, Sherfone removed the sword and the stone from his bag. Charlin, who had still been chuckling, immediately became serious upon the appearance of the sword and the stone. She was no longer laughing. Indescribable emotions flashed in her eyes as she fixed her gaze on the crystalline-cased sword in Sherfang's hands. Charlin reacted as if the sword in Sherfang's hands had suddenly appeared out of thin air. Just what is this? It actually escaped the detection of my eyes of God. Charlin was momentarily surprised. Even as she looked directly at the sword, her eyes of God could not discern any information. It was as if the sword before her did not exist. Eyes of God was a Tier 3 advanced detection spell, and even legendary items could not escape its detection. Yet the sword and the stone had actually. Can I have a closer look at it? Charlin asked, her curiosity reaching its peak. Sherfone did not reject Charlin's request, handing the sword and the stone over to her. The moment Charlin received the sword, she immediately cast over a dozen spells in quick succession. Every time one of her spells faded, Charlin's expression would grow slightly more serious. Amazing. It seems that I'll have to use my true abilities. Charlin smiled. Suddenly, a terrifying amount of mana burst forth from her body, and in the next instant, Charlin's holy light domain had devoured the room. Simultaneously, 2 golden magic arrays appeared on both the ceiling and the floor. Sherfone immediately felt his body grow heavy, the mana in the room rendering him immobile. Charlin's holy light domain was much stronger than the Tier 4 Sky Piercer Weissman had used against the mechanical slayer. At this moment, Sherfone had finally realized just how powerful Charlin was. It was no wonder why she could casually offer him the qualifications to establish his own city. However, Charlin was not done after summoning the twofold magic array, as her hands continuously drew line after line of divine runes in the air. After a short moment, the twofold magic array became a fourfold magic array, before finally becoming a sixfold magic array. At this moment, magic arrays covered all 6 sides of Charlin's room. The Tier 4 Sky Piercer Weissman had used only required a fourfold magic array to channel it. Yet, the spell Charlin channeled now required a sixfold magic array. At the very least, Charlin's spell should be a peak Tier 4 spell. Although Sherfone did not know what Charlin was trying to do, he felt incredibly fortunate. It seemed that asking Charlin to help him was the right choice after all. If Charlin could summon such a powerful magic array, her position in the stargazing tower should be relatively high. She might even be able to invite 3 Tier 4 NPCs to help him awaken the sword in the stone. At this moment, the runes Charlin drew seeped into the stone and the sword, which floated in midair. After another few minutes had passed, the golden divine runes separated from the stone and the sword and flew into Charlin's palm, forming a golden ball. Following which, the magic arrays disappeared from the room, and the stone and the sword landed in Charlin's hand once more. However, Charlin paid no attention to the sword and the stone. Instead, she focused the ball of divine runes, seemingly studying it. How could this be? Charlin muttered in utter disbelief. Not even divine appraisal, a peak Tier 4 spell, can analyze this sword? To think that you have such an item, I have really underestimated you. Even after exhausting every option I have, I still can't uncover a single thing about this item. How did you learn that this thing requires Tier 4 classes to awaken it? Charlin asked. By this time, she had completely given up on analyzing the stone and the sword. Sherfone wondered the same thing. I have simply used omniscient eyes. Charlin couldn't uncover even basic information about the sword and the stone? Just what kind of item was this? Omniscient eyes? Impossible. I couldn't analyze the sword even when I tried using the eyes of God. Charlene shook her head, slightly surprised by Shifeng's answer. However, she suddenly thought of a possibility. Don't tell me you have a golden stigmata. Shifeng nodded. No wonder. Charlene revealed a faint smile. Why didn't you tell me earlier, little dummy? Throughout God's domain, the omniscient eyes of the golden stigmata is only inferior to the eyes of truth. I really did not expect the war god's temple to be so generous as to give you a golden stigmata. Tell me, then, what are the conditions to awaken this item? Charlene inquired as she pointed at the sword in the stone. 21 mana stones and 3 tier 4 classes are needed to awaken the power slumbering within this sword. Shifeng recited the information he could see using the omniscient eyes. Little dummy, don't tell me you have 21 mana stones inside that bag of yours. Even Big Sister here doesn't have that many of them. Charlene's eyes glowed as she looked at Shifeng. Stretching out her jade-like hand, she said, Out with them, then. This? I only have 21 pieces. Shifeng instantly panicked. What kind of person do you take me for? Charlene rolled her eyes at the sight of Shifeng's caution. She then said, Relax, I won't rob you. I just want to awaken the power inside this sword. It needs 3 tier 4 classes to awaken this sword. Shifeng reminded, unwilling to hand over the mana stones. I know. However, do you think tier 4 powerhouses have the time and energy to help you? Charlene said, disgruntled. This sword is no trivial matter. Fortunately, you met me. Otherwise, even if you found 3 tier 4 powerhouses, they wouldn't help you. Their answers wouldn't change even if you offer each of them a fragmented legendary item. Chapter 380 Destroyer of Immortality. Chapter 380 Destroyer of Immortality. They won't help me even if I offer each of them a fragmented legendary item? Shifeng was taken aback. He did not think Charlene was lying. He had personally witnessed how extraordinary the sword in the stone was. Even Charlene, a tier 4 great divine official, could not uncover its secrets. Meanwhile, he had only obtained the golden stigmata due to luck. Otherwise, he would have never known that the sword in the stone was a legacy item. Fortunately, I made the trip here. Otherwise, I would have missed my chance. Shifeng inwardly celebrated his luck as he looked at the sword in the stone. Originally, Shifeng had thought he only needed to hire 3 tier 4 NPCs to help him. Now, it would seem that even if he found 3 tier 4 NPC powerhouses, there was no price he could pay to gain their help. Based on Charlene had said, however, even if he could afford the price, he still couldn't awaken the power within the sword in the stone. Alright, let's begin. I too want to see just what sort of item this is. Little dummy, stand back. Charlene was greatly interested in the sword in the stone right now. After saying so, Charlene tossed the 21 mana stones into the air and started chanting an incantation. The 21 mana stones suddenly split up and flew in all directions. Fortunately, Charlene's room was sufficiently large. After the mana stones flew 20 yards, they immediately stopped, hovering in the air. The mana stones then started to spin slowly. In the next moment, silvery white light shone from under their feet. Shifeng immediately distanced himself from the magic array that appeared, watching silently from afar. As the 21 floating mana stones rotated, the sword in the stone hovered in the center of the magic array. Charlene then shouted. Suffocatingly dense mana filled the room, buzzing. As if unable to withstand this immense pressure, the 21 mana stones immediately shattered into dust, forming clouds of gray smoke that flowed into the sword in the stone. When the sword in the stone completely absorbed one of the mana stones, the legacy item emitted a thumping sound that resembled a heartbeat. Shifeng even wondered if his ears were playing tricks on him at first. However, as more mana stones fused with the sword, the thumping became much louder and more powerful. It was as if the disintegrated mana stones were waking an ancient beast from its deep slumber. However, as mana stones continued to drift into the sword, Charlene, who currently stood inside the magic array, grew weaker. By the time the 7th mana stone fused with the sword, Shifeng could clearly feel that only half of the terrifying mana that filled the room remained. At this moment, Charlene had also greatly weakened. As the 14th mana stone melded with the sword, Charlene began to grow pale. When the 21st and last mana stone fused with the sword, Charlene wavered. A gentle breeze could send her tumbling to the floor. At this moment, Shifeng finally realized that it was not easy to awaken the sword in the stone. Channeling a single magic array had weakened a Tier 4 powerhouse to such a degree. It was no wonder why Charlene had said that no Tier 4 powerhouse would agree to aid him, even if offered a fragmented legendary item. Charlene's power stunned Shifeng. She had managed to complete a task that required 3 Tier 4 classes. Her strength was simply too frightening. Just who is she? Shifeng grew curious about Charlene's identity. It was impossible for an ordinary NPC to grow so quickly. Moreover, back in the god's grave, Shifeng saw a woman who looked exactly like Charlene. Although Charlene's strength could not compete with that slumbering woman's, the aura the two gave off felt exactly the same. The intensity was the only difference. While Shifeng pondered Charlene's identity, the awakening ritual had come to an end. The silver magic array that covered the floor vanished. Boom! The sword in the stone hovering in the air suddenly fell, half its blade sinking into the floor. Sharp! Charlene, who was currently unstable from the drain of mana, could not hold back her shock when she saw the blade slide smoothly into the floor. Not even the Great Destruction had managed to destroy the stargazing tower. The strongest and highest quality materials had gone into this monument's construction. Magic arrays reinforced the building further. A full-powered blow from a Tier 4 sword emperor armed with a legendary ranked sword could not even scratch the floor. Yet, the hovering sword and the stones sunk effortlessly into the wood. By now, the transparent crystal encasing the sword had completely disappeared. Only a sword with a golden hilt and guard remained, with a blade that was as pure and clear as a diamond. Impossible! This is actually the destroyer of immortality. Charlene was tongue-tied when she read the sword and the stone's information, which was now fully visible. Destroyer of immortality. A creation born of nature, containing unrivaled power. Although it was greatly damaged during the war between the ancient gods, it had absorbed some of their powers. If one can master this blade, they will obtain a trace of the ancient gods' powers. Class restriction: Berserker and Swordsman. Destroyer of immortality? Shifeng was puzzled. He had never heard this name before. Reading the item's introduction, apparently its origin was quite amazing. The ancient gods had actually used this weapon. Shifeng knew a little about the ancient gods. The ancient gods were born from nature, and they had the power to decimate the heaven and earth. Even the Tier 6 god-ranked classes of God's domain were no more than ants before an ancient god. They were practically invincible. However, all of these ancient gods had perished in the Great Ancient War. You must have heaven-defying luck. It is no wonder you didn't want an advanced legacy. Charlene smiled. She then explained. The Destroyer of Immortality is one of the 10 great saint legacy items in ancient records. Moreover, the legacy is unique. Not even the peak legacy of the Stargazing Tower can compete with it. 10 great saint legacies? Shifeng was at a loss. The highest legacies he had heard of in the past were peak legacies. This was the first time he had heard of the 10 great saint legacies. I, too, have only read about the 10 great saint legacies. Today is my first time actually seeing one in person. However, I don't know any details about them. Even so, I will remind you not to look down on these saint legacies. A peak legacy is already as difficult as a legendary quest. At the very least, the trial of 10 great saint legacies should be just as difficult. If you are not confident in succeeding, you should not recklessly attempt to challenge it. You might lose your life, even if you are a heaven-blessed individual. Charlene was extraordinarily serious when she looked at Shifeng, even more serious than when she gave the Immortal Crown quest to Shifeng. When she spoke of death, she had even paused for a moment. Shifeng could clearly discern the kindness in Charlene's tone, and he, too, knew how dangerous and difficult the trial of a saint legacy would be. God's domain's law of equivalent exchange held true everywhere. Naturally, there was danger in challenging the trial of a legacy. Take basic legacies, for example. If a player failed to clear the trial of a basic legacy, they would lose 3 levels, be weakened for 3 days, and be barred from accepting the trial again for 10 days. Meanwhile, the penalty for failing an intermediate legacy was much harsher. Players would lose 5 levels, be weakened for 7 days, be barred from accepting the trial for 20 days, and permanently lose a small portion of their attributes. For advanced legacies and peak legacies, Sherfone was 90% certain that he could complete an advanced legacy. As for a peak legacy, Sherfone had around 50% to 60% certainty of success. However, the legacy he had eagerly looked forward to turned out to be one of the 10 great saint legacies. Sherfone had never even heard of a saint legacy, so he was not too sure how well he would fare. Chapter 381 Attacks from Above and Below. Chapter 381 Attacks from Above and Below. Charlene was a Tier 4 Great Divine Official. The information she had access to would definitely surpass a player like Sherfone. The fact that she knew about the Destroyer of Immortality proved this point. Should I wait a little longer? Sherfone pondered in silence as he looked at the translucent sword that penetrated the ground. Now that the Destroyer of Immortality had awakened, he could take on the legacy trial anytime he wanted to. He could slowly build his strength before challenging the trial. That way, he would have a higher chance of successfully clearing it. After all, as one of the 10 great saint legacies, the consequences of failure would be severe. It might turn out just as Charlene had guessed. Death. Heaven-blessed individuals were immortal existences, being able to resurrect infinitely. Yet, despite knowing this, Charlene had still made such an ominous claim. This proved that the penalty of failure would be unbearable, and players would have no choice but to delete their accounts and start all over again. The wisest choice for Sherfone right now was to first increase his strength before challenging the Saint Legacy's trial. However, after campaigning in God's domain for a decade, Sherfone understood one thing clearly. Life in God's domain was like a boat sailing against the current. Either he kept going forward, or he would fall behind. Pursuing stability constantly was not enough. Sometimes, one needed to take risks to achieve a breakthrough. Moreover, Sherfone did not have too much time to waste. Risks and opportunities coexisted. The sooner he obtained the Saint Legacy, the smoother his path towards godhood would be. Originally, Sherfone had not been certain that he could become a Tier 5 class in this life. To do so, he had to plan and prepare carefully. As for becoming a Tier 6 God-ranked class, that was nigh impossible. That was the apex of God's domain. How could something like that be so easy to achieve? Sherfone was aware of his own capabilities. His current performance right now was only amazing due to his decade of experience playing God's domain. It was not possible to walk the path toward godhood just by having a few additional years of experience. However, if he gained one of the 10 great saint classes earlier on, coupling it with careful planning and preparation, he would have a better chance of becoming a god. Sherfone stepped up to the Destroyer of Immortality. He then grabbed the golden hilt of the sword. When he tried to pull the translucent blade out of the ground, however, it did not budge. No matter how much strength Sherfone exerted, the sword remained firmly stuck in the floor. Instead, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, do you wish to accept the legacy trial? Remaining time, 23 hours 54 minutes. Well shit. Sherfone bitterly smiled. The Destroyer of Immortality never intended to give him a chance to raise his strength. Sighing, Sherfone accepted the trial. Suddenly, the Destroyer of Immortality released a divine golden light, enveloping Sherfone. In the next moment, both the Destroyer of Immortality and Sherfone vanished from the room. Space transfer? Charlene's eyes flashed with surprise at both Sherfang's and the Destroyer of Immortality's sudden disappearance. A powerful barrier protected the stargazing tower, and all forms of teleportation magic were rendered ineffective here, regardless of whether said magic was used to enter or leave the tower. Yet, the destroyer of immortality had effortlessly accomplished this feat. Hopefully, that little dummy can pass the trials. Charlene smiled faintly, gazing at the spot where Sherfone had stood a moment ago. Awakening that sword drained me to such a degree. I'll have to rest for a long time. I let him off too lightly by taking only 500 gold. The next time we meet, I'll collect this debt, with interest. At this moment, Sherfone was at a complete loss. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in a dimly illuminated field. Swords were everywhere, from the sky to the earth. This place was literally a world of swords. In the distance, Sherfone could see a mountain piercing the sky. A faint, silver glow radiated from the mountain's peak, and it was the only source of light in this dim world. System, you have discovered the origin sword domain. System, you are in a unique realm. All forms of communications have been sealed. You are unable to make contact with the outside world. It would seem that this origin sword domain is independent of God's domain. Sherfone tried to call up the system map. However, the map was blank. Sherfone then took a look at his surroundings. As far as the eye could see, other than the mountain in the distance, there was nothing but flatlands. Moreover, the further one traveled from the mountain, the darker it would become. It looks like the only exit is at the peak of that mountain. Sherfone then examined the swords stabbed into the ground, all of which were immovable. Some even resembled buildings and plants. Unlike flowers and trees, however, Sherfone would receive damage if he touched these blades. To put it simply, he needed to avoid these swords as he advanced. As for the swords suspended in the sky, so long as he did not fly, they weren't a threat. However, this world only took a moment to correct that assumption. After Sherfone took a few steps forward, several swords descended from the sky. One of them just happened to slice past his arm, causing -200 damage. Crap! Raining swords? Sherfone looked at the swords around him, realizing why so many swords pierced the ground. Moreover, the swords that descended from the sky dealt a lot more damage than the swords on the ground. I'm guessing this trial requires players to avoid the swords on the ground while dodging the swords descending from the sky. Sherfone remained still for the moment. He silently observed his surroundings, searching for the best path towards the mountain. He chose to stand still because the moment he moved, the swords in the sky would start to fall. Most likely, the swords in the sky were set to fall based on the player's movements. Sure enough, this world is trying to kill me. After waiting for a moment, Sherfone discovered that the swords in the sky had not fallen. However, before he could rejoice over this discovery, the swords in the ground started trembling, and one after another, these swords sunk into the ground, vanishing completely. Feeling that something was amiss, Sherfone kept his gaze on the ground beneath his feet. Suddenly, tens of swords sprung up from the ground beneath him, soaring into the sky. Reacting quickly, Sherfone performed a backflip, dodging these blades. However, due to his backflip, the swords above plunged towards him. This is a joke, right? Sherfone immediately unsheathed the abyssal blade and Purgatory's shadow, defending against the incoming flying swords. One after another, blades of light struck the flying swords, scattering them. After these attacks, Sherfone finally realized that this world intended to toy with him until he died. If he rested, the swords on the ground would attack him after a short time. If he moved, the swords hovering in the sky would rain down on him. Such an attack pattern allowed him little to no time to rest or recover, keeping him on guard. Sherfone also discovered something else. The swords that descended from the sky were growing more accurate and faster as he advanced. Is this place trying to exhaust me to death? Sherfeng's lips curled up slightly with amusement. Immediately, he switched out the aura of space on the 7 luminaries ring for the aura of wind, increasing both his movement speed and attack speed by 40% and agility by 30%. He then dashed towards the distant mountain. The moment Sherfone moved, the countless blades in the sky began their assault. They all turned their blades towards Sherfone and shot towards him. However, Sherfone was like a gust of wind. Relying on his movement speed alone, he avoided most of the attacks. In addition, his increased attack speed allowed him to strike down the remaining swords effortlessly as he darted onward. However, after running for a few minutes, the ground in front of Shifeng suddenly split apart. In the next moment, bone knights in silver armor crawled out of the fissure, every one of them emitting frightening killing intent as they rushed towards him. Skeleton Warrior, Undead Creature, Elite Rank. Level 25. HP 20 000/20 Chapter 382 Legacy Chapter. Chapter 382 Legacy Chapter. The silver suits of armor shone brilliantly under the dimly lit sky, creating an exceptionally conspicuous sight. The assault from all directions forced Shifeng to an abrupt halt. Facing such intense attacks, Shifeng had no choice but to stop. Even he was not confident of defending against so many attacks on the run. This won't do. I won't last long at this rate. I need to move faster. Looking at the swords decorating the sky, an idea, inspired by his years of experience, struck Shifeng. Purgatory Power! Shifeng's attack speed rose by 100%. He then brandished the Abyssal Blade and the Purgatory's Shadow, sending blades of light at the incoming swords and striking them down. After continuing this process for 3 seconds, Shifeng successfully deflected all of the swords that attacked him, scattering them around him. Undead Creature? Shifeng activated omniscient eyes and examined the distant skeleton warriors. Shifeng could not learn anything about these undead monsters. If he faced them one-on-one, Shifeng was confident that he could defeat such a monster with ease. If he had to face a group of them, however, even he was not certain that he would win. Moreover, the swords in the sky still posed a huge threat. When the two combined, Shifeng's very life was at risk. However, Shifeng did not know if death meant failing the legacy trial. If it did, then he would truly be finished. As a precaution, Shifeng did not immediately move after fending off the flying swords. Instead, he stopped to think of an appropriate countermeasure. Changing my path isn't possible. For now, let's put these skeleton warriors to the test. The only exit was at the mountain's peak. Naturally, Shifeng could not retreat. However, charging forward rashly and accidentally losing his life was unwise. Hence, Shifeng activated Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger charging towards the skeleton warriors to test their strength. By doing so, not only could he buy himself time to come up with a defense against these undead monsters, but he could also avoid falling into any traps. After all, this was the trial of one of the 10 great saint legacies. He could not afford to be careless. The doppelganger possessed 70% of Shifeng's attributes. It was more than enough to deal with a single skeleton warrior. The doppelganger dodged the swords from above while approaching the skeleton warriors. However, when only a distance of 40 yards remained between them, the skeleton warriors still showed no signs of taking action. Instead, the monsters only focused on the doppelganger's every movement, killing intent oozing from their entire bodies. It looked as if they would explode at any moment. Disregarding the skeleton warrior's lack of a reaction, the doppelganger threw the blazing meteor at the closest undead creature. The weapon struck the monster's thigh, causing -816 damage. It would seem that the skeleton warriors only possessed mediocre defense. However, the instant the skeleton warrior was struck, it started moving and charged at Shifeng's doppelganger. The skeleton warrior that had been hit was not the only one to move. The surrounding dozen or so undead creatures charged at the doppelganger as well. Although the skeleton warriors wore full sets of silver armor, their movement speed was extremely fast. It took them less than 5 seconds to close the 40-yard gap. However, Shifeng's doppelganger did not stay idle as these undead creatures charged. Instead, it attacked with the blazing meteor again as it retreated swiftly. In terms of speed, the doppelganger clearly held the advantage. Despite needing to dodge the constant stream of attacks from the sky, it was still a thread faster than the skeleton warriors. As this game of cat and mouse continued, the HP of the skeleton warrior leading the charge gradually decreased. Everything proceeded smoothly, and Shifeng, who stood in the distance, did not discover any other traps hidden in this field. Moreover, the skeleton warriors possessed low intelligence. Aside from carrying out some basic defensive maneuvers, the group of undead creatures single-mindedly chased the doppelganger. After a short moment, the doppelganger killed its first monster. Although a skeleton warrior had died, other than a tiny amount of skill proficiency, Shifeng received nothing at all. He did not receive even a tiny amount of EXP. Even after the dozen or so skeleton warriors were wiped out, Shifeng did not receive anything. Fortunately, he didn't really care. He was in a legacy trial right now. His only goal was to clear the trial. As for whether or not he could earn EXP or items, that was not very important. With the doppelgangers probing, Shifeng's advance became much easier. There were no other traps in the surrounding area. The skeleton warriors also did not possess high intelligence or troublesome skills. As long as he dealt with the attacks from the sky properly, he could deal with these skeleton warriors by kiting them. What the doppelganger could do, Shifeng could do better. Shifeng's movement speed was too fast. Unlike the doppelganger, not only could Shifeng attack using the blazing meteor, but he could also cast AoE skills such as Thundering Flash and Earth Splitter to deplete the skeleton warriors' HPs while maintaining the distance between them. When the arcs of lightning weaved across the skeleton warriors, they dealt damages of -1,242, -1,784, and -2,439 to the undead creatures. Some of the skeleton warriors who received critical hits lost over half their HP. In less than 10 minutes, Shifeng had reduced the hundreds of skeleton warriors into piles of pearly white bones scattered across the plains. HM? What's going on with these bones? Just as Shifeng was about to depart from this field of bones, he noticed the bones begin to tremble. The bones then gathered. In the blink of an eye, these bones transformed into an entirely new monster. This monster was 3 times the size of the skeleton warriors from before. It wielded a skeletal giant axe in one hand and a thick black chain in the other. Dark green flames burned in its empty eye sockets. Emitting an angry roar, it charged at Shifeng with massive, thudding steps. With every step this monster took, the land beneath its feet would crack and shatter. One could see just how powerful this monster was. Skeleton giant, undead creature, chieftain rank. Level 30. HP 250,000/250,000. Why is it a level 30 chieftain? Shifeng was stunned. He instantly activated Windwalk and escaped. There was no way he could face a level 30 chieftain head-on while dealing with the incoming attacks from the countless swords in the sky. Moreover, with the skeleton giant's strength, a direct hit with its axe was all it needed to end Shifeng's life. Even if Shifeng dodged the monster's attack, the descending swords were no laughing matter. Each sword could deal -200 damage. Currently, Shifeng's HP was only slightly over 3,000. If 16 swords to hit him, he would lose his life all the same. Although the skeleton giant was colossal, it was frighteningly quick. Despite having activated Windwalk, Shifeng still could not shake off the skeleton giant, the distance between them never increasing. However, Shifeng also had to endure the rain of swords as he escaped. To avoid the blades, he was oftentimes forced to take action and strike back, affecting his speed as a result. Sometimes, in order to dodge a more densely packed attack, Shifeng had no choice but to dodge sideways, making a 90-degree turn. However, after Shifeng turned, the skeleton giant behind him would stumble. Its speed greatly fell when it changed directions, allowing Shifeng to widen the gap between them. Moreover, due to the skeleton giant's large frame, the sudden turn helped Shifeng block a few of the flying swords. When the swords struck the skeleton giant's body, the monster also received -200 damage from each attack. How could I forget? Due to their joints, skeletal monsters have difficulty dodging and turning. Shifeng smiled faintly upon seeing the skeleton giant's situation. Not only was the skeleton giant slow to react, but it would also receive damage from the swords above. Moreover, the skeleton giant's huge frame made the perfect shield. Considering the situation, a plan formed in Shifeng's mind. Following which, he made a 180-degree turn and charged directly at the skeleton giant's back. To deal with Shifeng, the skeleton giant had no choice but to turn around as well. Although its body spun relatively quickly, its feet could not keep up with its body. By the time the skeleton giant had stabilized itself and started swinging its giant axe, Shifeng had arrived beside its feet. As the swords in the sky cascaded down towards Shifeng, due to the skeleton giant being in the way, the monsters suffered the full brunt of the rain of swords. Now, not only did the swords in the sky no longer pose a threat to Shifeng, but they also benefited him. Seeing as his plan's success, Shifeng began to attack the skeleton giant. Meanwhile, no matter how many times the skeleton giant turned its body, Shifeng would always appear behind it. Faced with the continuous assault from Shifeng and the swords, the skeleton giant's HP fell rapidly. Half an hour later, the skeleton giant crumbled. Even until its death, it had not landed a hit on Shifeng. On the contrary, it had become his shield, blocking the falling blades. This fellow dropped an item? Shifeng noticed a golden piece of paper with divine runes laying beside the skeleton giant's remains. When Shifeng picked it up and tried to check its information, he only received an unknown in reply. Hence, Shifeng used the omniscient eyes. Legacy Chapter, 7th page. A scattered page that has fallen out of a legacy book written by the ancient gods. This legacy book holds records for one of the 10 great saint legacies. It has a total of 50 pages. After gathering all of the pages, the saint legacy contained within the legacy book will become available. Class Requirements: Berserker, Swordsman. Chapter 383, Blade Demon. Chapter 383, Blade Demon. So this is it, huh? Reading the item's information, Shifeng got a general understanding of the situation. Even if he ran to the mountain and reached its peak, that wouldn't mean he passed the trial. He needed to collect all 50 legacy chapters to pass. However, now that he knew what he needed to do, this trial would be much easier to defeat. He just had to search for skeleton warriors and kill skeleton giants to obtain legacy chapters. So, Shifeng began hunting around the fields for skeleton warriors. Although the swords in the sky were a nuisance, Shifeng gradually understood their attack patterns and could dodge them more efficiently. Soon, they were no longer much of an issue. Even when dealing with a large group of skeleton warriors, these swords would nick him a few times at most, dealing negligible damage. After killing 12 skeleton giants in a row, Shifeng discovered a problem. Not every skeleton giant would drop a legacy chapter. In fact, the drop rate was very low. After killing 12 skeleton giants, he only obtained 2 legacy chapters. None of the monsters Shifeng killed gave him any EXP either. He also needed to dodge the swords from above constantly. Hunting these skeleton giants was truly exhausting, both physically and mentally. If not for the fact that one of the 10 great saint legacies beckoned him, Shifeng would never tolerate such a strenuous and unrewarding task. While Shifeng searched for skeleton warriors all around the mountain, an incident occurred in White River City. Dark Star, a guild that White River City had already forgotten, suddenly declared its dissolution. This news came as a great shock to everyone. Some of the guilds who had previously allied themselves with Dark Star simultaneously announced their dissolution as well. Originally, everyone had thought that White River City was on the path of becoming the overlord of Star Moon Kingdom. However, no one could have expected the following development. Half a day after the dissolution of these guilds, a branch guild of Overwhelming Smile suddenly appeared in White River City. More shockingly, Lone Tyrant, who was originally the guild leader of Dark Star, had become the vice leader that led Overwhelming Smile's branch guild. Furthermore, the benefits that Overwhelming Smile offered were impressive, at least twice as valuable as what Dark Star had previously offered. It was a blatant display of wealth. The members of the dissolved guilds promptly joined Overwhelming Smile's White River City branch. Within half a day since Overwhelming Smile's branch guild's establishment, its member count had already reached 30,000. Moreover, that number was still increasing. It continuously recruited new members, thinking of ways to steal players from Zero Wing. Big Sis Aqua, Overwhelming Smile thinks too little of us. Instead of recruiting in their hometown of Maple City, they ran all the way here to fight us over members. The guild leader also suddenly disappeared and cannot be contacted. If we allow Overwhelming Smile to continue, By the time we start our recruitment tomorrow, they will have stolen all the good saplings. Big Sis Aqua, why don't we start recruiting right now? Snow Goose asked anxiously. It had been Zero Wing's fame that had attracted players from other cities. Yet now, Overwhelming Smile had come to steal the fruit of victory. It was truly despicable. Overwhelming Smile is truly ambitious. They've only obtained the first clear of a large-scale team dungeon, yet, already, they're hungering after White River City. Aqua Rose's eyes flashed with rage. Although she was not afraid of losing potential guild members, she could not stand Overwhelming Smile's arrogant attitude. They were clearly trying to provoke Zero Wing. Does Overwhelming Smile think it is so easy to weave a web in White River City? Let's start advertising our recruitment right now. I want to see how a second-rate guild without a guild residence plans to compete with Zero Wing in terms of benefits. Once Zero Wing began to prepare for its recruitment fervently as well, White River City exploded with activity. On one side, there was Overwhelming Smile, a guild that had claimed the first clear of a large-scale team dungeon and annexed Dark Star, one of the top 6 guilds of White River City. On the other side stood Zero Wing, a guild that possessed a guild residence, and was led by Star Moon Kingdom's #1 expert. Many players on the forums were also discussing which guild they should join. Big Brother Shadow Sword, White River City is truly interesting. Despite only being the 5th-ranking city of Star Moon Kingdom, it is now contested over by the 2 most popular guilds in the kingdom. Which guild do you think these independent players will join? The female guardian knight, Turtledove, asked the berserker beside her, Shadow Sword, with an amused smile on her face. I don't know what others will choose, but my goal from the very beginning has been to join Zero Wing. Shadow Sword wasn't interested in the competition between the 2 guilds. His only thoughts right now were of passing Zero Wing's assessment, and polishing his strength by learning from the experts in Zero Wing. He also hoped to learn from Zero Wing's guild leader Black Flame. He had no interest in anything beyond that. Meanwhile, after spending an entire day at the Origin Sword domain, Sherfong had collected 21 legacy chapters. Oh? What's that monster? At this moment, Sherfong, who stood at the foot of Sword Peak Mountain, discovered a monster of steel slowly descended the mountain. This steel monster seemed to be patrolling its territory. Although this monster was not large, only twice as tall as Sherfong, all 4 of its limbs were blades. The rest of its body was made of pitch-black steel, decorated with spikes. It looked like a machine of slaughter. Although Sherfong wanted to know this monster's information, he only received an unknown when he attempted to identify it. Even observing eyes failed to yield any results. Hence, Sherfong had no choice but to use omniscient eyes. Blade Demon, Demonic Creature, Chieftain Rank. Level 30. HP 300, 000/300, 000. Sherfeng's interest suddenly grew upon discovering that the Blade Demon was a chieftain-ranked monster. Since the chieftain-ranked skeleton giant had a chance to drop legacy chapters, the chieftain-ranked Blade Demon before him might drop the item as well. Fortunately, dealing with a single Blade Demon was much easier than destroying hundreds of skeleton warriors in addition to a skeleton giant. Moreover, the Blade Demon only had 300,000 HP. At most, it would only be slightly stronger than the skeleton giants. If so, Sherfong could defeat it easily. Of course, Sherfong would not rashly charge to his death. The only reason he had defeated the skeleton giants so easily was due to the monster's dull reactions, and the aid of the swords in the sky. On the other hand, not only was the Blade Demon a stronger monster, but it also wasn't that large. Sherfong didn't expect its reaction time to be as slow. If Sherfong confronted the Blade Demon directly, he would only seek his own death. Hence, he needed to identify the monster's weakness. If it's a demonic creature, then the Demon Hunter title will suppress its strength. Let's use the doppelganger to test things out first, then. Thinking so, Sherfong switched out his Might of 1,000 title for the Demon Hunter title. The Demon Hunter title reduced the attributes of all darkness-type monsters within a 100-yard radius by 10% and increased Sherfeng's damage towards darkness-type monsters by 10%. Demonic creatures were considered darkness-type monsters. Following which, Shifeng used Phantom Kill and sent his doppelganger charging forward. When the doppelganger was 40 yards away from the blade demon, it threw the blazing meteor at the monster. A red glow instantly crossed the distance between the doppelganger and the blade demon. Just as the blazing meteor was about to hit the blade demon's back, a black streak of light flashed over, striking the blazing meteor out of its path. What? Is it that amazing? Does it not have any blind spots? Shifeng muttered in shock. Shifeng's doppelganger had clearly launched its attack, yet, as if the blade demon had eyes in the back of its head, it deflected the flying projectile. Moreover, the blade demon's reaction was astonishingly quick. The skeleton giants paled in comparison. However, Shifeng did not believe that the blade demon had no blind spots. The doppelganger activated Windwalk and circled to the other side of the blade demon. Once again, it threw the blazing meteor, launching a series of attacks in quick succession. The blazing meteor shot at the blade demon again and again. However, no matter which angle it approached, the blade demon easily deflected it. Moreover, the monster moved extremely fast, leaving afterimages wherever it passed. In just a moment, the blade demon stood in front of Shifeng's doppelganger. Shwa! 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 In the blink of an eye, the blade demon had launched dozens of attacks. Despite the doppelganger having already activated defensive blade, the demon broke through the skill almost instantly. The doppelganger only managed to block a few attacks before losing its life. Shifeng's eyes widened as he watched his doppelganger's death. However, after a brief moment of shock, Shifeng suddenly discovered that the blade demon had not returned to its wandering after killing the doppelganger. Instead, it turned around and charged directly at him. Chapter 384 Unique Set Equipment. Chapter 384 Unique Set Equipment. Despite also being a level 30 chieftain, the blade demon was far more powerful than the skeleton giant. Realizing that he could not face the blade demon directly, Shifeng immediately activated Windwalk and ran. He wanted to break away from the combat area as quickly as possible. However, after running for over 100 yards, the blade demon was still on his tail. Although Shifeng's movement speed was much higher than the blade demon's, with the countless blades in the sky restraining him, Shifeng was not actually much faster than the blade demon. The distance between the two hovered around 30 yards. The blade demon was determined to chase Shifeng to the ends of the world. As long as the blade demon caught up to Shifeng, he would have to deal with the attacks from both the blade demon and the swords descending from the sky. At that time, his fate would be sealed. I need to find a way to deal with it. I'll be in trouble if it catches up. Shifeng examined the surrounding terrain. The area around him was the very definition of flatlands. The fields were endless, and there was nothing that he could use to his advantage. However, as Shifeng moved further away from Sword Peak Mountain, the number of swords that descended from above increased. It was as if they were reminding Shifeng that he was not allowed to move away from the mountain. However, Shifeng couldn't care less right now. If he stopped, only death awaited him. Hence, he continued running at full speed while enduring the countless swords raining down on him. After running for a certain distance, Shifeng suddenly noticed that, whenever the blade demon behind him touched the densely packed swords that had fallen to the ground, damages of -100 would appear above its head. Due to the hindrances in its path, the blade demon's speed also slightly decreased. Shifeng's troubled expression transformed into a wicked smile. Just before the effect of Windwalk was about to disappear, Shifeng took out a speed scroll from his bag and used it. He then continued running away from Sword Peak Mountain. This time, however, Shifeng purposefully zigzagged. This way, if the blade demon wished to approach him, it would definitely collide with the swords on the ground. As a result, not only would the blade demon's speed decrease, but it would also receive a continuous stream of damage. The blade demon had a total of 300,000 HP. With its battle recovery, it could regain 3,000 HP every 5 seconds. Shifeng could not kill the blade demon by relying only on the scattered swords. Hence, Shifeng occasionally threw the blazing meteor at the monster. However, the Blade Demon's defensive capabilities were simply too powerful. Out of all of Shifeng's attacks, only 10% struck the Blade Demon. Shifeng also used skills such as Thundering Flash and Earth Splitter, dealing over -1000 damage with each hit. Overall, the damage the Blade Demon received barely surpassed its battle recovery. If Shifeng wanted to kill the Blade Demon, he would need to spend a very long time to do so. It seems that I can only drag things out. Shifeng had no other options. The only fortunate thing about this situation was that the Blade Demon could eventually die. Time passed bit by bit. While Shifeng played his game of cat and mouse with the Blade Demon, White River City had become extraordinarily lively. Zero Wing had finally started its recruitment. The independent players who had waited eagerly for this moment were incomparably excited. As everyone arrived at Zero Wing's recruitment location, anticipation overwhelmed them. The Purple Sun Mansion, the real estate that occupied the largest landmass and best location in White River City, was actually Zero Wing's guild residence. I'm not seeing things right? Isn't this the Purple Sun Mansion? Zero Wing isn't even giving the other guilds a chance. Damn! Zero Wing's guild hall is huge. It won't have any problems holding several thousand players at a single time. That's nothing. I have a brother in Zero Wing. I hear that it's even more amazing inside. Aside from having a high-class bar, many NPCs appear every day to issue guild quests. The number and variety of guild quests they get far surpass those available at the Adventurers Association. Not only can members of Zero Wing obtain a lot more EXP, but the item rewards they can get from the quests are also much more abundant. Some quests even reward secret silver items. Also, if members rest inside the guild hall, they can accumulate a double EXP buff. There are private rooms available for rent, too. For a time, everyone began forming a long queue outside Zero Wing's guild residence, enthusiastically applying to Zero Wing. From a glance, the number of players in line had already exceeded 30,000. The many benefits such as high-level quests, double EXP buff, private rooms and more had sent all the independent players into a frenzy. Meanwhile, when news of Zero Wing's guild residence spread, the various guilds throughout Star Moon Kingdom tumbling into a turmoil. Originally, these guilds didn't think much of a guild residence. However, they never expected a guild residence to provide such significant benefits. All this time, they regarded a guild residence as only a symbol of a guild's establishment, a place where guild members could gather and chat. Now that they realized what a guild residence could do, the upper echelons of these guilds felt a chill crawl down their spines. A guild residence was simply too terrifying. Not only could it increase the leveling speed of guild members, but it could also provide a source of coins for the guild. Now that Zero Wing possessed its own guild residence, the guild would no longer have to purchase coins using credits or form teams to specifically farm coins. The guild residence also had other aspects that could allow a guild to develop quickly. How could guilds like theirs that did not possess a guild residence compete with Zero Wing now? At this time, the first-rate guilds who were not originally concerned with Zero Wing had to reevaluate their opinions. Young Master Foam, now that Zero Wing has revealed their guild residence, everyone in Star Moon Kingdom has shifted their attention back to them. Overwhelming Smile's achievement can no longer hamper Zero Wing's recruitment. Should we focus on solidifying the branch guild in White River City? I have really underestimated Black Flame. However, don't think that I am out of options. Feng Xianyang sneered. Since you dare challenge me, you will only have one ending. Tell Overwhelming Smile this. Don't worry about spending money, just steal as many players from Zero Wing as possible. I want to see just how a guild without many members can develop. Shortly after Feng Xianyang gave his command, Overwhelming Smile took action. Overwhelming Smile shocked the various guilds in White River City. Overwhelming Smile has gone insane. Snow Goose shouted when she read the latest information on Overwhelming Smile. In order to attract independent players, Overwhelming Smile had increased the benefits it offered once again. At this moment, it offered 4 times what Dark Star had in the past. Normal members alone would be treated far better than even elite players of other guilds. The benefits offered to Overwhelming Smile's elite members was beyond comparison. Overwhelming Smile even began to publicly poach Zero Wing's normal members, promising them threefold what the other guild members received if they joined the guild. Originally, Overwhelming Smile's increase in the benefits was already shocking. Now that they took it a step further and offered another threefold raise, how could the members of Zero Wing not be tempted? In fact, some members already considered withdrawing from Zero Wing and defecting to Overwhelming Smile. Is Overwhelming Smile planning to destroy us with money? Aqua Rose smiled bitterly, her expression turning grim. This move was truly vicious. Zero Wing had only established recently. Its funding had never been abundant. They had no chance against the large funding Overwhelming Smile possessed. While Overwhelming Smile was in the midst of waging a poaching war against Zero Wing, Shurfeng had finally reduced the Blade Demon's HP to its last vestiges. Die! Abruptly spinning around, Shurfeng dashed towards the low HP Blade Demon. Abyssal Bind! Flame burst. Abyssal Bind immediately tethered the Blade Demon in place. Following which, the scorching abyssal blades slashed at the demonic creature's body 12 times in a row. Every slash dealt over -2,000 damage to the Blade Demon, devouring the monster's remaining 20,000 HP. As the Blade Demon died, Shurfeng noticed a piece of paper falling beside the monster's body. He originally thought that it was a legacy chapter. However, upon picking it up, Shurfeng froze. At that moment, he even thought he might be hallucinating. Broken Steel Forging Design Fragment. Epic Rank Unique Set Equipment. Set consists of a total of 6 pieces. Current fragment count, 1/18. Chapter 385 Professional Level. Chapter 385 Professional Level. No way! Shurfeng struggled to calm himself even after staring at the forging design in his hand for a long time. Previously, when he obtained the fine gold rank dragon scale set equipment back in the God's Grave, he had believed it to be the top set equipment currently available, second to none. However, with Shurfeng's current forging standards, he could not forge the dragon scale set equipment. He needed to become an advanced forger before he could attempt it. However, a lot of time was required to advance to an advanced forger, time that Shurfeng did not have. Yet now, the forging design for an epic set equipment had fallen into his hands. If he could equip an epic set equipment, killing players would be as easy as slicing vegetables. He would truly be invincible among fellow players. Originally, Shurfeng's head had ached thinking about ways to deal with the 5 cities controlled by Underworld. Now, however, this fragment swept those concerns away. As long as he could don the complete Broken Steel set equipment, he alone could become enough of a nuisance to disturb those guilds. Now that Shurfeng knew the Blade Demons dropped the forging design for the Broken Steel set equipment, even if he had to exhaust himself for a few days, he would obtain all the forging design fragments. Shurfeng was suddenly brimming with enthusiasm. Turning around, he charged towards Sword Peak Mountain in search of another Blade Demon. Unknowingly, another day had passed in God's domain. Before Shurfeng logged out of the game, he had killed several dozens more skeleton giants and Blade Demons. In the 2 days he had spent in the Origin Sword domain, Shurfeng had obtained a total of 33 legacy chapters and 8 broken steel forging design fragments. He was not far from completing both the legacy book and the broken steel set equipment forging design. Shurfeng had lingered in God's domain for 2 natural days without logging out to rest. As his body had been in the virtual gaming cabin all this time, the moment he stepped out of the cabin, his stomach growled a hungry complaint. However, his body did not feel any discomfort after laying motionless for 2 days. On the contrary, he felt extremely relaxed. It's as expected of a virtual gaming cabin. It even assisted my body's absorption of the S-rank nutrient fluids. Shurfeng clenched his fists and stretched. Revealing a faint smile, he thought, my punching power should be around 320 kilograms now. Originally, Shurfeng had needed 5 days to absorb a bottle of S-rank nutrient fluids, allowing the liquid to restore his body's vitality and repair broken cells. Now, however, only 2 days had passed, and Shurfeng had already absorbed the S-rank nutrient fluids. Shurfeng judged that, based on his body's current condition, he should barely meet the standard of a professional fighter. His current body had already far surpassed his body in his previous life. At the very least, his physical fitness was no longer inferior to the apex experts of God's domain. Being young really is great. If I started training my body only after I turned 25, it wouldn't really make a difference. Shifeng was satisfied with his current physical fitness. As long as he continued his training, his physical fitness would continue to improve. At that time, he could exert more of his brain's potential, allowing him to break through the boundaries he had never been able to cross. Although Shifeng was hungry, he did not immediately look for something to eat. Instead, after leaving the virtual gaming cabin, he walked towards his fridge and retrieved a bottle of A-rank nutrient fluids. He then filled his empty stomach with the cold liquid. After having not eaten for 48 hours, although he had the protection of the virtual gaming cabin during this period, filling his stomach with solid food would negatively impact his body. It was best to drink nutrient fluids first and let his stomach gradually adapt. After a few hours, he could have a proper meal. Looking at the bottle of A-rank nutrient fluids in his hand, Shifeng felt like he was dreaming. Over 10 days ago, he had lamented spending 10 credits on a meal. Now, however, despite drinking a bottle of nutrient fluids that cost 10,000 credits, he felt nothing at all. Although his reincarnation was part of the reason, it was more due to his change in mentality brought about by strength. Suddenly, his doorbell rang. Accessing the doorway monitor through his quantum watch, Shifeng discovered Blackie standing outside his door. For some reason, Blackie looked panicked. It looked like he had some very urgent news. Shifeng promptly disabled the lock to his front door using his quantum watch. "Brother Feng, where have you been these past 2 days? I haven't been able to contact you all this time. I even wondered if you were in some kind of accident." As Blackie burst into the apartment and saw that Shifeng drinking a bottle of nutrient fluids, he unconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. "What could possibly happen to me?" Shifeng chuckled. "Did something happen while I was gone?" "Of course, something happened. Overwhelming Smile had been poaching our members. Although our guild's member count has increased steadily, the benefits Overwhelming Smile is offering are too enticing, and many have started considering defecting to Overwhelming Smile. I initially thought of increasing the benefits Zero Wing provides as well. However, Sister Aqua said no. Although Sister Fire Dance only focuses on the guild's core team, she agreed with Aqua Rose's opinion. However, at this rate, more members will leave the guild. If we allow this situation to continue, it will negatively impact Zero Wing as a whole. We need to think of a solution for this quickly. I have been trying to contact you all this time, but you haven't answered any of my calls or messages. I had no choice but to visit you personally." Blackie then explained the general situation to Shifeng. "Overwhelming Smile sure is intent on destroying us with money." Shifeng smiled bitterly. "Brother Feng, you too?" Sister Aqua said something similar. Blackie was somewhat astonished. "I understand the situation. However, I am still tied up with my quest. Go back and tell Aqua to continue recruiting members. The benefits we offer will stay the same, but loosen the entry requirements a little." Shifeng also showed his support for Aqua Rose's decision. "Let's see just how many players you can steal from us. How much money do you plan to burn?" Taking Blackie's advice and increasing the benefits that Zero Wing offered was not a long-term solution. Moreover, Overwhelming Smile could simply counter by increasing the benefits it offered again. If this trend continued, the situation would soon snowball out of control and grow into an all-out economic war. At that time, the side with the most funds would be the final victor. Meanwhile, Feng Xianyang, who quietly supported Overwhelming Smile, aimed for just that. If he had to increase the benefits Overwhelming Smile offered dozens of times, he would. He was confident he could destroy Zero Wing this way. Meanwhile, although Zero Wing could cause Overwhelming Smile to suffer greater losses by raising the benefits it offered, they would still lose. Zero Wing did not have the support of a large corporation. It also did not have the funds to contend with Overwhelming Smile. If Zero Wing increased its offer, it would dig its own grave. Shifeng had seen many of such situations in his past life, and he had considered his options long ago. The best thing was to bide their time and stay on course. However invincible the opponents might seem, he would forever remain true to himself. Moreover, when Shifeng had established Zero Wing, he had intended to establish a guild that was pure, rather than one where its members would leave because of a little enticement. Zero Wing did not need such shallow people. At this moment, instead of cursing, Shifeng wanted to thank Overwhelming Smile for ridding the scum from his guild. Shifeng's reply left Blackie speechless. However, since Shifeng had already decided, he would fully support his guild leader. In truth, Blackie knew that increasing the benefits the guild provided would only increase the burden of Zero Wing. However, he still could not help his panic. Now that he had obtained Shifeng's reply, his anxiety began to fade. Chapter 386 Tier 1 Skill. Chapter 386 Tier 1 Skill. After receiving Shifeng's confirmation, Blackie gave his report regarding Zero Wing's recent recruitment. Despite their plans, Overwhelming Smile's appearance did not negatively affect Zero Wing's recruitment. Instead, Overwhelming Smile had made Zero Wing even more popular than before, driving more players to apply to Zero Wing. Some players from other guilds even withdrew from their respective guilds to join Zero Wing. As a result, the entrance of Zero Wing's guild residence was crowded with a sea of players. Those who did not fully understand the situation even thought that Zero Wing had already become White River City's overlord. Though, those who knew the situation silently ridiculed the players rushing to join Zero Wing. After 2 days of chaotic recruitment, Zero Wing had grown from around 5,000 members to having over 10,000. If not for Overwhelming Smile's interruption, Zero Wing would have no problems surpassing the 30,000 member threshold. Unfortunately, many of the players who had been accepted into Zero Wing then defected to Overwhelming Smile almost immediately. By doing so, they could enjoy triple the benefits of the ordinary members of Overwhelming Smile, which was 12 times the treatment normally offered by other guilds. How could anyone resist such a tempting offer? Zero Wing will only suffer if this continues. I need to think of a plan quickly. Shifeng frowned as he listened to Blackie's report. If the situation continued to evolve like this, Overwhelming Smile would have to waste astronomical sums of money. However, Overwhelming Smile's poaching of Zero Wing's members would also increase its prestige, increasing the guild's strength in White River City. Others might not know that Overwhelming Smile had underworld support from the shadows, but Shifeng knew. In addition to Maple City, Underworld had also taken control of 4 more cities surrounding White River City. If Zero Wing and Overwhelming Smile went to war in the future, Zero Wing would be surrounded by enemies. After Blackie finished his report, he hurried back to Zero Wing's workshop, whereas Shifeng started working out. Now that Shifeng's body had finished absorbing the S-rank nutrient fluids, it was the perfect time to improve his physical fitness further. However, instead of focusing on strength training like before, Shifeng now focused more on control over his own body. When noon arrived, Shifeng called for a takeout. After finishing his meal, he dove back into the world of God's domain. Shifeng had not come up with any good ideas to counter Overwhelming Smile's suppression through wealth. The only thing he could think of right now was increasing his strength. After logging into the game, Shifeng continued his hunting operation. Through his previous 2-day search, Shifeng had grasped the general respawn time for the monsters surrounding the Sword Peak Mountain. As for the location with the highest spawn rate, that would be on the Sword Peak Mountain itself. However, Shifeng had not climbed the mountain throughout this period. He doubted that the legacy trial of one of the 10 great saint legacies would be so easy to clear. Although the skeleton giants and blade demons were indeed challenging, a legacy trial that was supposed to be as difficult as a legendary quest should not be so simple. In Shifeng's opinion, the true danger of the Origin Sword domain waited for him on the Sword Peak Mountain. Hence, Shifeng had yet to set foot on the mountain. Instead, he had searched for monsters around the foot of the mountain all this time, silently increasing his strength. In the Origin Sword domain, Shifeng did not obtain any EXP from the monsters he killed. The drops he obtained were also limited to the legacy chapters and broken steel forging design fragments. However, there was one other immediate benefit to killing these monsters. Skill proficiency. The monsters here were all elites above level 25. Shifeng's main targets, the skeleton giants and blade demons, were even level 30 chieftains. These chieftains exceeded Shifeng by 8 levels. Whenever Shifeng used a skill on these two monsters, he would receive bonus skill proficiency points, receiving around 5 or 6 with each use. In the outside world, there was a limit to high-leveled chieftains available for players to kill. Hence, Shifeng was able to raise his skill levels quickly here. In the Origin Sword domain, Shifeng had upgraded the skills that he normally needed a lot of time to upgrade in just 2 days. At this point, all of his attack-type skills had risen to level 10 or above, with some reaching level 11. When he upgraded a skill beyond level 12, it would become a Tier 1 skill. Although players had weapons and equipment that could increase their skill levels, that particular increase would not allow a skill to undergo a qualitative change. Only the skill's level would change. For a skill to reach Tier 1, players needed to raise the skill past level 12 personally. Meanwhile, as long as Shifeng could grasp a Tier 1 skill, his combat power would explode. This was why Shifeng diligently killed the monsters outside the Sword Peak Mountain. With this goal in mind, Shifeng continuously searched for monsters and used his skills repeatedly, allowing his skill proficiency to soar. However, as Shifeng killed more monsters, he discovered something odd. The drop rate of legacy chapters and design fragments plummeted. In the beginning, Shifeng could claim a drop in every 4 or 5 kills. Now, he would only get a single drop after killing over a dozen chieftains. The more legacy chapters and design fragments Shifeng obtained, the harder it became to collect them. If Shifeng did not increase his killing speed, it would be impossible for him to gather the required items within 5 days. On the bright side, where players in the outside world normally needed over a week of effort, Shifeng only needed a few hours to upgrade a skill from level 11 to level 12. His efficiency was staggering. After just half a day's worth of effort in God's domain, Shifeng had already promoted Chop to a Tier 1 skill. Chop action type. Requires sword. Tier 1, level 1, proficiency 0/30,000. Additional 600 base damage. Deals up to 3 consecutive hits in 1 second. If attacks land in the same location, damage increases by 50%. Attack range 6 yards. Cooldown 3 seconds. Compared to the Tier 0, level 12 Chop, the base damage had not increased much. However, when using the Tier 1, level 1 Chop, Shifeng could swing his sword 3 times in 1 second. Moreover, if his attacks struck the same location, his damage would increase by 50%. Not only did Tier 1 skills increase a player's power, but they also increased the player's freedom of attack. In other words, the more skilled a player was, the more damage they could deal. This was why, despite being the same level, Tier 1 players were far more powerful than Tier 0 players. Tier 1 players also possessed much higher attributes and a larger variety of skills. Tier 0 players had no chance of contending with Tier 1 players of the same level. It's been a while since I've used the Tier 1 Chop. Let's use you as a warm-up. Shifeng dashed towards the skeleton giant's side before him and used the Tier 1 Chop. A sharp aura covered the abyssal blade. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng brandished the weapon 3 times, sending 3 sword auras slashing at the skeleton giant. The 3 sword auras combined, forming an even sharper and more powerful sword aura that slashed at the skeleton giant's joint. -1376, -2048, -2062. Aside from these 3 high damages, the skeleton giant, which had remained unperturbed by Shifeng's attacks, had suddenly fallen to the ground. The power of the Tier 1 skill was clear. After the skeleton giant fell, Shifeng had a much easier time attacking it. Following which, Shifeng used one skill after another on the undead creature. If the skeleton giant stood up, Shifeng would use Chop to attack its joints, knocking it to the ground once more. A short moment later, Shifeng had slaughtered the skeleton giant effortlessly. Due to the Tier 1 chop, Shifeng's battles between the skeleton giants and blade demons had become much easier and took less time than before. Moreover, as Shifeng's efficiency grew, he used his skill more frequently. After spending another 2 days, Shifeng finally upgraded Thunder Flame Explosion to Tier 1 as well. Now, Shifeng's attack-type skills that required skill proficiency were all Tier 1 skills. Compared to when Shifeng had just entered the Origin Sword domain, his combat power was far more frightening. It should be about time to climb the Sword Peak Mountain. Chapter 387 Magic Night. Chapter 387 Magic Night. Shifeng had already stayed in the Origin Sword domain for 3 days now. After killing a large number of chieftain-rank skeleton giants and blade demons, the number of legacy chapters and broken steel forging design fragments he could obtain from these 2 monsters had also reached its limit. No matter how many of these monsters Shifeng killed, they no longer dropped any items. If not for the fact that Shifeng wanted to upgrade all his attack-type skills to Tier 1 skills and raise his current combat power to its utmost, he would have long since charged up Sword Peak Mountain. Although he could still continue trying to upgrade the tier of his skills, the amount of skill proficiency required to raise a skill from Tier 1 to Tier 2 was simply too much. This was a feat that could not be accomplished within a short amount of time. In addition, Shifeng did not have much time left. Shifeng had promised to help Gentle Snow in 5 days' time. Hence, he had no choice but to proceed with the legacy trial. Moreover, during this period of time, another major incident had occurred in White River City. After taking the first clear of the large-scale team dungeon in Maple City, Overwhelming Smile had gone on to claim the first clear of the Land of Death, the large-scale team dungeon in White River City. Meanwhile, Ouroboros' team, which was led by Gentle Snow, was a step behind, becoming only the second team to clear the Land of Death. Although Gentle Snow was only a step behind, it was a world of difference. The reason being, only the first team to clear a large-scale team dungeon would have its achievement announced. There was nothing waiting for second place. If Gentle Snow wished to have an announcement of her own, then she would have to clear the Hell Mode Land of Death. However, the Hell Mode of the Land of Death was much more difficult than Hard Mode. She would require a large amount of time to raid the Hell Mode Land of Death, making it not worth her effort at all. It was much better for Gentle Snow to place her focus on raiding level 20 large-scale team dungeons, especially 100-man team dungeons. Compared to going from level 10 to 20, the time span between level 20 and 30 was much wider. Leveling in God's domain took much longer the further one went. After reaching level 20, players would find themselves taking far longer to level up. Hence, guilds would have much more time to challenge dungeons than before. On Sword Peak Mountain, Shifeng had not met with any danger throughout his entire journey. He also did not meet a single monster on the mountain. However, the closer he got to the light at the summit, the faster the swords in the sky descended. Moreover, the number of swords that shot at Shifeng also greatly increased, raising the difficulty of the ascent. Is the difficulty only this much? Shifeng felt very surprised. Although these dropping swords were indeed giving him some trouble, he would have no problems reaching the top of the mountain through dodging and blocking. After spending 4 days in this place, Shifeng had collected a total of 49 legacy chapters and 17 design fragments. He was only 1 piece away from completing both items. As the only exit of the Origin Sword domain, the peak of the mountain definitely held the final legacy chapter and design fragment. What's that? Shifeng suddenly discovered a majestic-looking armored knight standing at the mountaintop, the knight's hands gripping a great sword. This armored knight was different from the skeleton giants and blade demons. The reason being, this great sword-wielding knight was not a monster but an NPC, instead. Doran Paley, Tier 1 Magic Knight. Level 30. HP 300, 000/300, 000. Level 30 Tier 1 NPCs were much harder to deal with compared to level 30 chieftains. Meanwhile, the Tier 1 NPC in front of Shifeng was clearly not an ordinary existence. Although Doran Paley only possessed 300,000 HP, the same amount as the level 30 chieftain rank Blade Demon, the skills and intelligence he possessed would definitely be far stronger and higher than the Blade Demons. To players, Doran Paley was a nightmare. However, Shurfong no longer had a path of retreat right now, he could only advance. After making his preparations to confront the Magic Knight, Shurfong charged forward while dealing with the swords raining down on him. Yet, the moment Shurfong stepped onto the stone platform Doran Paley stood on, the swords in the sky also stopped attacking him, as if declaring that Shurfong had completed the game of cat and mouse. Challenger, since you have managed to arrive at this place, it shows that you indeed possess some strength and are qualified to fight me. As long as you can defeat me, you will be allowed to continue advancing. When Doran Paley noticed Shurfong, instead of entering battle immediately, he revealed an excited expression and explained. Starting now, you have 5 minutes to prepare. 5 minutes later, I will start attacking. Of course, you are also allowed to initiate an attack ahead of time. I hope that you do not disappoint me. A one-on-one duel? Shurfong looked at his surroundings but failed to discover any other traps or monsters. However, after giving it some thought, Shurfong found nothing strange about this situation. The NPC before him was a Tier 1 class. Doran Paley was definitely not an opponent ordinary players could contend against. Since Shurfong was given 5 minutes to rest, he would certainly not waste it. He promptly sat down on the stage and took out a delicious steak to eat. Not only would he recover stamina and HP this way, he would also receive some bonus attributes. Although running and dodging for long periods of time did not greatly affect a player's body, it was a massive drain on their mental power. Meanwhile, 5 minutes was plenty of time for Shurfong to restore himself to peak condition. However, Shurfong did not just spend his 5-minute rest drinking and eating. He also carefully observed the surrounding environment, as well as studied the NPC named Doran Paley. Shurfong had seen the class known as Magic Knight before in his previous life. It was considered a rare hidden class. An advanced legacy. Magic Knights and Astromancers were classes notorious for being unorthodox. Attacks of Astromancers were known for being strange. Attacks of Magic Knights were known for being violent. Compared to a Tier 1 swordsman, a Tier 1 Magic Knight had more variety in their attacks. The reason being, they incorporated various sorts of magic. In other words, their attacks inflicted a combination of physical and magic damage. Not even Tier 1 shield warriors could endure the attacks of a Magic Knight. However, this hidden class also suffered from a very glaring weakness. In order to increase their attack power, Magic Knights had discarded their life-saving skills. Hence, they were very poor in terms of survivability. The seconds and minutes quickly passed by. Of course, Shurfong would not wait until the 5 minutes were up to attack Doran Paley. In this kind of battle, the first person to strike held the greatest advantage. Hence, Shurfong took the initiative to start the battle. When Shurfong was only 40 yards away from Doran Paley, he suddenly took out the blazing meteor and threw it at the Magic Knight's vital point. Doran Paley simply scoffed at Shurfong's attack. He retrieved the silver greatsword from his back and lightly swung it. Immediately, blades of flame shot out from Doran Paley's greatsword. These blades of flame collided with the blazing meteor, striking it down, before proceeding towards Shurfong. However, when these blades of flame were only about halfway to their target, Shurfong suddenly appeared behind Doran Paley and initiated a Tier 1 chop at the Magic Knight's back. Doran Paley suddenly smiled. He spun around abruptly, the flames covering his greatsword growing even more prominent. With a swing of his greatsword, he sent a flame tornado clashing against Shurfong's abyssal blade. When the two swords collided, sparks splattered the surroundings. After clashing swords for dozens of times in a row, Shurfong concluded that, in terms of strength, he was no match for the Magic Knight. On the other hand, his speed was superior to Doran Paley's. Despite having to retreat before the Magic Knight's every blow, Shurfong managed to avoid receiving any fatal damage. However, under the circumstances, the battle would eventually end in his defeat. After all, Doran Paley possessed 300,000 HP, whereas Shurfong had just slightly more than 3,000 HP. In a situation where both parties were equally skilled, the side with more HP would naturally emerge the victor. To begin with, Shifeng's combat power was inferior to Doran Paley's. As a Tier 0, you indeed deserve praise for being able to fight against me. However, what do you think of this move? Doran Paley revealed a faint smile. Suddenly, the flames surrounding his great sword disappeared. In the next moment, cold air wrapped around the silver great sword. With a light swing, the area 40 yards around Doran Paley turned into a land of extreme frost. Inside this domain of frost, both Shifeng's movement speed and attack speed declined greatly. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng lost his speed advantage. Chapter 388 Flame Dragon's Dance. Chapter 388 Flame Dragon's Dance. Shifeng hurriedly retreated upon seeing this scene, wanting to escape Doran Paley's frost domain. He had not expected Doran Paley's intelligence to be high enough to actually grasp a player's weakness. This sort of NPC was an extremely rare sight in the current God's domain. Only in the later stages of God's domain would players be able to frequently see such NPCs. Moreover, these NPCs were usually Tier 3 NPCs and above. Meanwhile, Doran Paley was only a Tier 1 NPC. Higher intelligence. I won't stand a chance with the status quo. Shifeng's expression turned solemn when he saw Doran Paley's figure charging at him. If Doran Paley were only an ordinary Tier 1 NPC, even if he had 300,000 HP, Shifeng would have been confident of defeating him. Before leaving White River City, Shifeng had armed himself with over 100 Tier 2 magic scrolls from the guild warehouse. Meanwhile, most of these Tier 2 magic scrolls came from the Blood Hand Association's stronghold, with the rest from the dungeon raids carried out by guild members. The Origin Sword domain was different from the 12 trials Shifeng had previously undergone. In the 12 trials, Shifeng had not been allowed to use any tools to assist him. However, the Origin Sword domain did not impose such a restriction. He could use as many magic scrolls as he liked here. If he had over 100 Tier 2 magic scrolls, it would be an easy task to deal with an ordinary level 30 Tier 1 NPC. Even if Doran Paley had 300,000 HP, he would still die under the might of so many Tier 2 magic scrolls. However, the situation was different now. In the past, Shifeng had crossed swords with many high-tiered NPCs, so he knew very clearly that NPCs who possessed higher intelligence were extremely sensitive towards magic scrolls. Players required some casting time, however short, when using magic scrolls. Meanwhile, when higher intelligence NPCs noticed this, they would either hurriedly withdraw to escape the effective range of the magic scroll, or they would decisively charge up to interrupt the casting process, not giving the player any chance to attack using the magic scroll. Seeing Doran Paley charging at him, Shifeng immediately brandished the Abyssal Blade and cast Abyssal Bind at the Magic Knight. 9 pitch-black chains suddenly emerged from the stone floor. In response, Doran Paley simply snorted and stabbed his great sword into the platform. In the next moment, a golden magic array rose up from underfoot and quickly enveloped his entire body. The magic array released a faint golden glow, and when the pitch-black chains touched this golden glow, they instantly turned into smoke and vanished. Shifeng immediately recognized the golden glow covering Doran Paley's body. This skill was called Free Will. Upon activation, the skill made the user immune to all control effects, rendering a control skill like Abyssal Bind completely useless. Shifeng gritted his teeth and activated Wind Rider, increasing his movement speed by 150% as well as gaining the ability to fly temporarily. He escaped out of Doran Paley's frost domain right after. However, when the battle began, a magic barrier had formed around the combat platform, enclosing it completely. Hence, although Shifeng could fly now, he could not get too far. When the 20-second duration of Wind Rider ended, Doran Paley would still catch up to him. At this rate, Shifeng would still die sooner or later. The seconds passed by quickly, and from beginning to end, Doran Paley fervently chased Shifeng. As a magic knight, Doran Paley might possess great destructive power and an absolute advantage in a direct confrontation, but he was sorely lacking in life-saving skills and control skills. Hence, Doran Paley was utterly helpless against Shifeng's extreme speed, and he grew furious at this situation. Within his frost domain, Doran Paley could clearly finish Shifeng off with just a few hits. Yet, as if Shifeng was a lively rabbit, not only was he very agile, his ability to escape was also first-rate. I want to see just how long you can stay in the air. The moment you descend will be the moment I end your life. Doran Paley lightly snorted, glaring at Shifeng, who was hovering in the sky. Meanwhile, Shifeng was also silently observing Doran Paley from midair. When in a desperate situation, the most important thing to do was to remain calm. That was one of the basics of surviving in God's domain. No matter how one looked at the situation, a Tier 0 player simply had no chance to defeat a level 30 Tier 1 higher intelligence NPC. Not to mention, said NPC was even a magic knight that possessed 300,000 HP. If it were anyone else standing in Shifeng's place right now, they would have long since lost their lives. Despite his dire situation, Shifeng remained very calm. The reason being, he knew very clearly that legacy trials would not mercilessly toy around with players. Shifeng firmly believed that the trials should have given him a lifeline. However, where was this lifeline? The entire stone platform was currently enveloped by a magic barrier. Moreover, the platform was completely flat, with a range of activity of only 100 by 100 yards available. The entire platform was paved with black stone slabs with strange patterns engraved all over them. Meanwhile, the patterns on these dozens of stone slabs came together to form magic patterns that Shifeng had never seen before. Other than those, there was nothing else on the stone platform. Is my lifeline these magic patterns? Shifeng had a certain amount of understanding in regard to magic patterns. However, he only grew confused when he looked at the magic patterns engraved into the stone slabs. Just what function did these magic patterns have? Soon, Wind Rider's duration ended and Shifeng descended back to the stage. Doran Paley immediately charged at him. Shifeng hurriedly activated Purgatory Power and abruptly jumped. As he raised the abyssal blade up high, raging flames and golden lightning emerged around the blade of the silvery gray weapon. Shifeng then swung the abyssal blade down at Doran Paley's head. Suddenly, as if the space surrounding Doran Paley solidified, the magic knight's movements turned sluggish. Not only did the Tier 1 Thunder Flame explosion possess a wider effective range, the duration of the fainted effect had also increased to 6 seconds. In addition, upon activation of the skill, enemies within a 10-yard radius would also receive a slowness effect. Enemies affected by this effect would have their speed reduced to only a sixth of their original, only recovering 1/6 of their speed with each passing second. Doran Paley snorted and activated Free Will once more, immediately shaking off the slowness effect. He then sent a flame cross slash to counter Shifeng's Thunder Flame explosion. When the two skills collided, countless sparks flew to the surroundings. Cracks also appeared on the stone platform. Meanwhile, the impact sent Shifeng flying backward, his body slamming heavily onto the ground. Shifeng's entire body went numb, and his HP started madly decreasing as well. In the blink of an eye, his HP had fallen below 1,000, and it still showed no signs of slowing down. Panicking, Shifeng hurriedly retrieved an intermediate recovery potion from his bag and emptied its contents. His HP soon stopped decreasing, barely staying above the 800-point threshold before slowly rising. In the end, his HP recovered to over 1,100. Thunder Flame Explosion was a skill that possessed frightening destructive power. Yet, despite both being Tier 1 skills, just the impact between Doran Paley's Flame Cross Slash and his Thunder Flame Explosion had caused him to lose over half of his HP. If he went through another clash like that, he would definitely die. Currently, Shifeng felt numb all over, even moving his arm was a challenge. He would not be able to defend against Doran Paley's next volley of attacks for a short period of time. However, something strange happened. Instead of immediately initiating another offensive at Shifeng, Doran Paley actually stood there motionless. What's going on? Shifeng was surprised. At this moment, Doran Paley was glaring at him with eyes filled with killing intent. It did not seem as if the Magic Knight wanted to give him a breather. Yet Doran Paley just kept looking at him. Wait. His armor. Shifeng discovered cracks on Doran Paley's black armor. However, these cracks were in the midst of slowly mending themselves right now. Is it because my attack has damaged his armor? Shifeng's heart was filled with uncertainty, and he thought of trying it once again. Currently, Shifeng had difficulty moving about. Seeing that Doran Paley gave no indication of taking action, Shifeng took out a Tier 2 magic scroll, Flame Dragon's Dance, from his bag. Chapter 389 Legacy Book. Chapter 389 Legacy Book. Shifeng needed some time to activate a Tier 2 magic scroll. If he were dealing with an ordinary player or boss, this short time he needed wouldn't be an issue. However, against higher intelligence NPCs and expert players, this small amount of time was enough for the opponent to either dodge the magic scroll or take his life. As Shifeng unrolled the magic scroll, Doran Paley's armor finished repairing itself. At this moment, the magic knight gazed at Shifeng with mockery. Lifting his silver greatsword, Doran's legs abruptly pushed against the ground, launching himself at Shifeng with frightening speed. However, Shifeng, who was in the midst of activating the magic scroll that contained the Flame Dragon's Dance, could not afford to move. Otherwise, his efforts would go to waste. Faster! Hurry up! At this moment, Shifeng's heart pounded with anxiety as he watched the slow progression of the Flame Dragon's Dance's activation bar. When Doran was only a few yards from Shifeng, he abruptly jumped into the air. Raising his great sword above his head, he swung it down towards Shifeng. As the weapon of mass destruction descended, deep red flames resembling snakes emerged and coiled around the blade, the moisture in the air evaporating upon the emergence of these flames. At the moment of Shifeng's imminent peril, the activation bar of the Flame Dragon's Dance finally completed. Suddenly, raging flames emerged from the Crimson Magic Scroll, transforming into a serpentine dragon that shot towards the sky. Doran Paley smiled disdainfully at the sight of the flame dragon bearing its fangs at him. Surprisingly, the magic knight made no effort to dodge the incoming dragon. Instead, he tightened his grip on his great sword and added more power into his slash. The snake and dragon collided. The Flame Dragon's Dance was a Tier 2 spell, and in terms of power, it was far superior to Doran Paley's attack. In the next moment, the flame dragon devoured the fire snake. The dragon then threw Doran, a damage surpassing -10,000 points appearing above his head. However, 10,000 damage was merely a scratch to Doran, an NPC with 300,000 HP. After Doran Paley struck the ground, he stood and charged at Shifeng once again without the slightest pause. His current performance had completely changed. Moreover, Doran's armor wasn't even scratched. What is going on? Shifeng frowned at the magic knight, confused. The Flame Dragon's Dance was clearly far more powerful than his Tier 1 Thunder Flame explosion. The spell had even inflicted over 10,000 damage. Yet, not only was the NPC's armor intact, but Doran also brimmed with fighting spirit. Considering the situation, Shifeng quickly came to a realization. The cracks in Doran Paley's armor had not been due to damage. Watching the magic knight charge at him once again, Shifeng suddenly thought of a possibility. Let's hope this works. Shifeng's body was still slightly numb. Even if Doran did not activate his frost domain, Shifeng could never outrun him. Shifeng had also exhausted his arsenal of escape skills. Shifeng then raised the abyssal blade and activated Earth Splitter. When the skill had fully charged, Shifeng swung down his viciously sharp blade. However, Shifeng's target was not Doran Paley this time. It was the black stone slab beneath him. Upon witnessing this attack, Doran's eyes widened with shock, and his expression became extremely ugly. He suddenly increased his speed again. However, no matter how much faster Doran became, he was not fast enough to counter Shifeng's attack on the stone slab. Like a hot knife through butter, the silvery gray abyssal blade sliced apart the black stone slab beneath Shifeng's feet. The slash also split several other stone slabs, creating a deep, long fissure. Following which, a crack also appeared on Doran Paley's armor. Bingo! Shifeng inwardly rejoiced. If he attacked and damaged the black stone slabs under his feet, he could force Doran Paley to halt his assault momentarily. He could then activate Tier 2 magic scrolls without worry. Despicable challenger! Doran Paley was no longer as carefree as before. With bloodshot eyes, he glared at Shifeng and bellowed, "Your corpse will decorate this ground for eternity!" Although larger cracks began to appear on Doran Paley's armor, the magic knight showed no signs of stopping. Instead, he charged up to Shifeng and swung down his great sword. Flame Cross Slash! Before Shifeng could grasp the situation, he instinctively used parry to defend himself. Pun! Shifeng retreated 4 steps before he managed to stabilize his body. Although Shifeng had been forced back and had to use his life-saving skill, parry, he revealed a joyous smile on his face. Originally, even if he negated the damage from Doran's attack, the impact would have sent him flying back over a dozen yards. Now, although his hands were slightly numb, he had only been forced to take 4 steps backward. This showed that Doran Paley's strength had greatly weakened. Indeed, just as Shifeng had guessed, damaging the black stone slabs would weaken his adversary. Previously, Doran had not immediately dashed forward and attacked Shifeng because he was worried that Shifeng would discover this secret. Hence, he decided to hold back and allow his armor to repair itself. However, the display of his armor's recovery had been another facade. In reality, Doran had tried to hide the black stone slab's recovery. Previously, Doran's position had just so happened to block Shifeng's vision, preventing Shifeng from seeing the damaged stone slabs behind him. As to why Doran had launched himself up to attack Shifeng the second time, it was to prevent the flame dragon's dance from damaging the black stone slabs once more. Unfortunately, Doran's attempt at repeatedly disguising this fact could not escape Shifeng's beast-like insight. Naturally, after Doran Paley realized that his secret had been exposed, he no longer attempted to hide it. Instead, he began a vicious assault on Shifeng, hoping to annihilate his opponent sooner. However, a known secret was no longer a secret. Now that Shifeng knew Doran Paley's weakness, he activated Defensive Blade and used Thundering Flash on the stone beneath them. Streaks of blue lightning shot out from the abyssal blade. In the next moment, the lightning transformed into hungry wolves that dove into the black stone slabs, charring them. Die! Doran Paley's rage flared as he swung his great sword at Shifeng desperately. However, Defensive Blade deflected every slash. Most importantly, with each consecutive slash, Doran's attacks grew weaker. When Defensive Blade was almost exhausted, Shifeng switched out the Aura of Wind on the 7 Luminaries ring for the Aura of Water. Aura of Water. Received healing increased by 60%. Cast consumption reduced by 30%. Activatable skill dash. Life Bloom. Heals selected target for 20% HP every second for 40 seconds. Cooldown, 1 minute 30 seconds. Currently, Shifeng had less than 1,100 HP. Even if Doran Paley had grown weaker, Shifeng would still not survive more than a few hits from the Magic Knight. Hence, he cast Life Bloom on himself. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng recovered more than 1,000 HP. For the next 40 seconds, he would also receive over 1,000 HP every second. Following which, Shifeng began to confront Doran head-on. While defending against Doran Paley's attacks, Shifeng also made sure to attack the black stone under his feet. Shifeng could not help but admit that Doran Paley was indeed very powerful. Despite losing so much of his strength, the NPC could still inflict over -1,500 with Flame Cross Slash. Fortunately, Flame Cross Slash had a long cooldown. By the time Doran could use the skill again, Shifeng's HP would have long since fully recovered. During Life Bloom's 40-second duration, Shifeng had destroyed over half of the stone slabs of the platform. Meanwhile, not only had Doran Paley's strength sharply decreased, but his speed had also fallen by quite a bit. Shifeng now had a much easier time facing the NPC. Occasionally, Shifeng also used Phantom Kill, allowing his doppelganger to pin down Doran while he used a Tier 2 magic scroll from the side to destroy the black stone slabs. Unfortunately, although this infuriated Doran Paley, he could do nothing to stop Shifeng. As soon as Shifeng had shattered all of the stone slabs on the combat platform and was about to focus his attacks on Doran Paley, Suddenly, Doran Paley's armor shattered, the metal shards scattering across the ground. Doran Paley then gripped his head with both his hands and let out an agonized scream that echoed throughout the Sword Peak mountain. In the next moment, Doran Paley's full HP bar emptied, his body transforming into particles of light and vanishing. 4 items dropped to the ground in place of Doran's body. There was a pitch-black key with a faint blue glow, a silver stone tablet, and the final legacy chapter and broken steel forging design fragment. Before Shurfong could pick up the drops, all of the legacy chapters he possessed flew from his bag and combined with the legacy chapter Doran had dropped, forming a thick and heavy ancient book. Golden divine runes decorated its cover. If translated to the language of players, these divine runes would read as Legacy Book. Chapter 390 Secret Sword Technique. Chapter 390 Secret Sword Technique. Shurfong sighed in relief when he saw the dazzling golden book of legacies. With this, the trial should be over, right? Shurfong picked up the drops before walking towards the hovering golden book before him. He then clicked on the book of legacies, checking its information. System: completion rate 70%. Do you wish to open the book of legacies and accept the legacy within? What? Only 70%? Shurfong was surprised. Taking another look, he was sure his eyes were not playing tricks on him. After defeating a Tier 1 magic knight like Doran Paley, which was no easy feat, he had only completed 70% of the trial. Legacies in God's domain were categorized into different ranks. Similarly, there were differences within each rank, and these differences were based on the completion rate of the legacy trial. Completion rates between 51%–60% would be given a C rank evaluation. At C rank, players would obtain the basic skills of the legacy. Completion rates between 61%–70% would be given a B rank evaluation. At B rank, players would obtain the basic skills of the legacy in addition to 1-3 legacy skill points. Completion rates between 71%–80% would be given an A rank evaluation. At A rank, players would obtain the basic skills of the legacy in addition to 5-9 legacy skill points. Completion rates between 81%–90% would be given an S rank evaluation. At S rank, players would obtain the basic skills of the legacy in addition to 10-18 legacy skill points. Completion rates between 91%–100% would be given an SS rank evaluation. At SS rank, players would obtain the basic skills of the legacy in addition to 20-36 legacy skill points. Legacy skill points would unlock the class skills in the legacy book. Moreover, the more powerful a class skill was, the more legacy skill points would be required to unlock it. The number of powerful skills a player possessed was important in determining their combat power. It was especially true for powerful class skills. Hence, legacy skill points were extremely important. However, it was not easy to obtain legacy skill points. After obtaining the legacy book, aside from receiving 1 legacy skill point every 3 levels, players could only obtain more points by completing special quests and challenges. In general, legacy skill points were an extremely rare commodity. Right now, Shurfeng's completion rate would only give him a B rank evaluation, and he would, at most, receive 3 legacy skill points. This was unacceptable. He had only obtained one of the 10 great saint legacies after much difficulty, so why would he be satisfied with just 3 legacy skill points? Moreover, he only needed 1% more to boost his evaluation up to A rank and receive a minimum of 5 legacy skill points. He would need to level up 6 times to bridge this small gap. Is it because I killed Doran Paley by exploiting his weakness? Shurfong silently pondered his situation as he rejected the offer to open the legacy book. Based on Shurfeng's recollection, one needed to complete certain tasks in order to increase the legacy trial's completion rate. However, since arriving at the Origin Sword domain 4 days ago, Shurfong had constantly observed and searched for anything special in the realm. He had done so precisely because he wanted to avoid missing anything, resulting in a low completion rate. Yet, after 4 days of careful observation, Shurfong had not discovered anything special. He had the same results after he explored the entire mountain. Just what did I miss? Shifeng thought that he had performed perfectly in this legacy trial, and he should not have missed anything suspicious. He had even completed the broken steel forging design. As for the skeleton warriors, skeleton giants, and blade demons below the mountain, they would respawn indefinitely. It was not possible to eradicate them. Does it have something to do with these items? Shifeng stored the legacy book before retrieving the pitch-black, sword-shaped key and the silver tablet. Doran's key. This is a strange key. It exudes a faint trace of ancient magic. Secret sword technique. The pattern engraved on this tablet is too vague and incomplete, and no information can be obtained from this pattern. However, some kind of divine power hides within this pattern. If one gathers all of the stone tablets, this vague and incomplete pattern can be restored. Current tablet count, 1/6. This was the first time Shifeng had seen or heard of an item like this secret sword technique. However, judging from its description, it should not be related to the legacy trial. After all, 6 tablets were required to restore it, and no matter how he thought about it, there should not be any more enemies as strong as Doran Paley. Hence, Doran's key was the only possibility. As the final boss of Sword Peak Mountain, his key would have something to do with the Sword Peak Mountain itself. Since there's a key, there must be a lock here somewhere. Shifeng put away the key and tablet, and began to explore every inch of the mountain carefully. While Shifeng was in the Origin Sword domain, Star Moon Kingdom had undergone many changes. The large-scale dungeons of the various cities in Star Moon Kingdom had been conquered, one after another, generating one system announcement after another. Moreover, due to Zero Wing's incitement, the various guilds throughout Star Moon Kingdom had also rushed to earn reputation, hoping to obtain their own guild residence. When Zero Wing had publicized its guild residence, Overwhelming Smiles spent an astronomical sum of money to poach Zero Wing's members. However, despite this being a significant blow, Zero Wing had not stopped developing. On the contrary, they grew stronger with each passing day. Now Zero Wing's member count approached 20,000. Moreover, Zero Wing's members sported high levels. Currently, most average players in White River City were only level 18 or 19, while elite players of guilds were around level 21. Meanwhile, Zero Wing's ordinary members were level 20, while its elite members were all level 22 or above. Although there was only a difference of 1 level between the elite members of Zero Wing and the other guilds, the necessary EXP to surmount this gap was intimidating. The majority of the NPC commissioned guild quests found inside the guild residence were high-level quests. Not only did these quests reward a ton of EXP, but the item rewards were also impressive. Most importantly, the monetary rewards of these guild quests were much higher than the guild quests available at the Adventurers Association. As a result, the income of Zero Wing's members was at least twice as much as players of other guilds. This was also why Overwhelming Smiles' high-priced poaching could not defeat Zero Wing. Snow, are you really planning to do this? The Flame Witch, Zhao Yueru, asked worriedly. This isn't what I want either. However, I have to take this risk. Otherwise you too know how things will end. Gentle Snow said, frowning as she quietly read the report she had just received. But Zhao Yueru wanted to persuade her friend but soon shut her mouth, holding back her protests. She knew that, no matter what happened, there would be a battle in the end. Only, this final battle had arrived too early, catching them unprepared. Snow, you've read the latest report. With our strength, we are no match for them. Rest assured, I would not take such a risk if I were not certain. Gentle Snow smiled faintly as she recalled Yifeng's figure. Zhao Yueru was surprised by Gentle Snow's expression. Facing such a desperate situation, she never thought Gentle Snow could still smile with such confidence. Meanwhile, back on Sword Peak Mountain, after spending most of the day searching, Shifeng finally discovered a pool on the mountainside. This place is somewhat suspicious. Slowly, Shifeng walked towards the pool of water. Dipping his hand into the pool, Shifeng immediately realized that ice had formed over his hand, freezing it solid. The water inside this pool was icy. If he dove into this water, he would freeze to death. Chapter 391 Underwater Mysteries. Chapter 391, Underwater Mysteries. This pool of water seems interesting. Not only is the water so cold, but it is also light as air, weightless. Moreover, even with 60 points in ice resistance, it still freezes my hand. Sherfone muttered, shocked as he examined his frozen hand. Just what is this water? With 60 points in ice resistance, players could withstand most cold environments in God's domain. However, Sherfang's resistance was useless against this water. It was astounding. Following which, Sherfone took Doran's key from his bag, hoping the key would trigger some sort of reaction. However, despite making a full circle around the pool while holding the key, nothing happened. He did not discover any kind of lock either. Is it inside the pool? Sherfone was fairly confident that was the case. According to the statistics collected on God's domain in the past, most chance encounters and treasures were normally found in treacherous lands. Only a few treasures and encounters occupied safe areas, and these normally required players to possess sufficient status or luck. As for the so-called treacherous lands, players also knew them as forbidden lands. Unless players had ways of dealing with the threats, their deaths were all but guaranteed upon entering these forbidden lands. Meanwhile, the small pool before Sherfone was clearly one such forbidden land. If he entered the pool without a plan, he would freeze to death. If not for his 60 points of ice resistance, he would have received a large amount of frost damage the moment he came into contact with the water. He might have even frozen to death instantaneously. Furthermore, even though it was only his hand that had frozen, it still took over a dozen seconds before it thawed completely. If Sherfone jumped into the water, although he might not receive any damage due to his ice resistance, the water would still freeze his body. With how light the water was, he would surely sink to the bottom of the pool once the ice encased him. In the end, he would still drown. What should I do now? Sherfone gazed at the cold water and meditated quietly. It would be great if I could increase my magic resistance. It had never been easy for players to raise their magic resistance. It was also impossible for players to come into possession of equipment that could raise magic resistance at this stage of the game. Even if they had such equipment, the effects would be minimal. Sherfone only managed to accumulate 60 points in ice resistance due to the ice blue devil flame and the golden stigmata. For ordinary players, they'd be lucky if they had 10 points of ice resistance at this stage of the game. Of course, the quickest way to raise one's magic resistance was to consume a magic resistance potion. Even a basic magic resistance potion could raise one's magic resistance significantly. If Sherfone could consume an intermediate magic resistance potion, adding that to his own magic resistance, he might be able to cope with the frosty water. However, Sherfone did not have any magic resistance potions on him at the moment. The recipe for basic magic resistance potions only dropped in level 20 maps and above. Meanwhile, the recipe for intermediate magic resistance potions only dropped in level 40 maps and above. Obviously, Sherfone could not obtain any of these recipes right now, not to mention the recipe for the specialized ice resistance potion. However, if he could not enter the pool, how was he supposed to obtain the remaining 30% completion rate? If he entered the pool, he would become an ice sculpture. Unless he could get his hands on an ice resistance potion, he had no way to combat the powerful cold within the pool. This freezing effect is truly troublesome. I wonder if Fantasy World's magic damage immunity will work. Sherfone touched the water and allowed his hand to freeze once again. He then tried the activatable skill of the Aura of Illusion, Fantasy World. However, even after activating Fantasy World, the freezing effect had not dispelled. If Aura of Illusion won't do, what about Aura of Space? Unwilling to give up, Sherfone waited for another minute before switching to the Aura of Space and submerging his hand into the pool water once again. This time, a miracle actually happened. Although Sherfone could still feel an unbearable, biting cold, his hand did not turn into a solid block of ice. As expected, heaven will always leave a door open. As long as he dealt with the pool's effect, which bound his movements, he would have an easier time dealing with the water. So what if he had to endure a little cold? Sherfone was confident that he could tolerate it. Following which, Shifeng activated Phantom Kill and had his doppelganger remain by the poolside as insurance. Within 40 seconds, if his life were threatened, he could immediately swap positions with his doppelganger. Shifeng then dove into the pool, creating a loud splash. As the water was extremely light, Shifeng managed to sink quickly with little effort. Moreover, the deeper he sunk, the darker it became. Soon, darkness devoured Shifeng's surroundings. It was as if he had fallen into a bottomless pit. Currently, Shifeng felt as if he had suddenly been thrown into the Arctic North, naked. The slightest movement stung painfully inside this chilling water. If any normal person were in his place, they would have definitely screamed in pain. However, from beginning to end, Shifeng only gritted his teeth and remained silent. As Shifeng sunk deeper into the pool, the stinging sensation became more intense. At this moment, even someone with a strong will, such as Shifeng, could no longer cope with the pain. His complexion had paled, and his eyes were bloodshot. The pain was so unbearable that he could not even scream if he wanted to. Why haven't I reached the bottom yet? Shifeng's anxiety grew as he looked at the time. 10 seconds had passed since he jumped into the water. Although he had not received any actual damage thus far, the pain took a huge toll on his mental strength. He had greatly underestimated this water. He did not think that the water below would become so cold. Shifeng was already approaching his limit after spending 10 seconds in this pool. He was also surrounded by darkness, so he could not see anything below or around him. Struggling, Shifeng activated Ice Blue Devil Flame. Even while underwater, the Ice Blue Devil Flame burned brilliantly as it wrapped around Shifeng's body, causing the temperature of the surrounding water to rise rapidly. The light from the flames also illuminated Shifeng's surroundings. Shifeng breathed a sigh of relief at the effects of the Ice Blue Devil Flame. The rise in temperature allowed him to recover from the cold and pain, and the chill was just barely tolerable. As Shifeng observed his surroundings, he suddenly discovered that the pool of water was much larger than he had imagined. Previously, he could not see anything due to the darkness. Now that he had the Ice Blue Devil Flame, he could see everything clearly. How was this a pool? There was actually a courtyard beneath him. Hence, Shifeng started swimming downward, hastening his descent. The courtyard at the bottom of the pool looked ancient. Its architectural style was completely different from the buildings he had seen in the current god's domain. It looked like the Elysium spoken of in legends. It was fascinating. Although this place was very beautiful, Shifeng could sense great danger. Moreover, whether it was in this life or his previous life, this was the strongest sense of danger he had ever felt. System, you have discovered the Eternal Courtyard. That should be the place. Shifeng swam towards the spiral building with a shut gate that he had seen from the courtyard. Even the stargazing tower paled in comparison to this beautiful and mystical place. If not for the danger Shifeng felt, he would have stopped and admired the scenery. The tightly shut gate was made of gold, and many drawings had been engraved on it. These drawings seemed related to the destruction of the ancient gods. Shifeng had even discovered the image of an ancient god that he knew of, the Twilight Goddess. Some sort of power protected the Golden Gate, and it was impossible to destroy it with external forces. Currently, Shifeng was not of the mind to study the images as he had discovered a keyhole on the gate. Meanwhile, this keyhole was centered in an image of the sun. Shifeng then took out Doran's key and inserted it into the keyhole, twisting it gently. Chapter 392 God's Will. Chapter 392 God's Will. Sure enough, it works. Upon turning Doran's key, Shifeng noticed the blue glow surrounding the key flow into the Golden Gate. Suddenly, the gate released a brilliant golden radiance. As if it were the sun, the gate illuminated the Eternal Courtyard. The gate clanked as it slowly opened. Following which, a surge of cold air bubbles rushed out of the gate. Reacting quickly, Shifeng immediately jumped backward. However, as Shifeng was currently underwater, he could not move as fast as usual. As a result, the bubbles blasted him backwards. Shifeng only felt a stinging pain before his HP instantly fell by 2,000 points. The cold air here is so powerful. Sherfone looked at his HP bar in disbelief. Fortunately, his ice resistance was sufficiently high. Otherwise, that air bubbles would have killed him. Sherfone then took out an intermediate recovery potion from his bag and drank it, recovering some of his lost HP. Despite having 60 points in ice resistance, he had still lost 2,000 HP instantly. How cold was it beyond this gate? Fortunately, after the gate finally opened, the cold air scattered, and the spiraling tower was no longer as cold as before. After Sherfone entered the temple, he was immediately greeted by a large hall containing golden statues of various ancient gods. Among the many statues, there was one particularly eye-catching statue that depicted a valiant man raising up his sword. That man stood in the very center of the hall, and high-grade swords littered the area around him. A simple glance told Sherfone that there were over 1,000 swords stabbed into the ground. Meanwhile, every sword seemed like it was submitting to the man. Sherfone could even faintly feel the abyssal blade in his hand grow restless as if it, too, wanted to go forth and submit to that man. Sherfone was astounded. That man in the center of the hall was simply a statue. Yet, the abyssal blade that Sherfone feared even showed signs of submission to him. Just how powerful had he been when he was alive? Meanwhile, a dark blue crystal ball sat below the statue. This crystal ball emitted an intense cold. Upon seeing this crystal ball, Sherfone came to a realization. The reason the pool of water containing the eternal courtyard was so cold was that of the crystal ball before him. Sherfone's heart suddenly trembled at this discovery. If the crystal ball was capable of lowering the temperature of this large pool to such a degree, it was definitely a treasure. Following which, Sherfone quickly swam towards the crystal ball, hoping to claim it. However, before Sherfone could reach the crystal ball, a sharp pain shot through his fingers, a damage of -1,000 points appearing above his head. Sherfone had no choice but to back off. Sherfone silently lamented as he gazed at the dark blue crystal ball. Despite such a powerful treasure sitting right before him, he could not take it as his own. Just as Sherfone was about to move on and look for other treasures, a system notification rang out. System, the will of an ancient god drifts around this eternal hall. Are you willing to surrender to this will? Before Sherfone could react, majestic voices suddenly assaulted his mind. Submit to me! I can give you unparalleled strength and make you the most powerful man in this world. Even gods will tremble before your might. Submit to me! I can give you eternal life and make you into the eternal master of this world. Listening to the tempting voices in his mind, Sherfone was suddenly dazed and decided to submit to this will. However, just as Sherfone was about to reply, memories from the past suddenly surfaced in Sherfone's mind. In the past, because he chose not to submit to world dominators, Shadow had forced him out of God's domain. Even so, he still refused to submit, and had planned to start all over again. In this life, when he faced Martial Union, Dark Star, and Underworld, as long as he bowed down, he could live a better life. Yet he still refused. He would no longer allow others to dictate his life, becoming someone's puppet. How could he possibly give in now? Just as Sherfone was about to refuse, the majestic voice spoke once again. Don't you wish to become the master of this world? If you submit, I will give you anything and everything you want. Since it is the case, I only want the ability to say no. Can you give me that? Sherfone refused to submit. Foolish mortal! You will regret your decision today. Since you do not wish to become my servant, die. Seeing as it had failed to delude Sherfone, the will of the ancient god grew furious, and the entire hall became stifling. Suddenly, the thousands of swords that had been thrust into the ground rose into the water. Aiming for Sherfone, every one of these swords shot towards him. In response, Sherfone hurriedly attempted to use Replace Doppelganger to swap positions with his doppelganger. However, he discovered that he had been silenced, the debuff preventing him from using the skill. Now that he could not swap positions with his doppelganger, Sherfone tried to raise his swords to defend against the incoming attack. However, he discovered that not only were his skills sealed, but he also couldn't move. At this moment, he could only watch the thousands of swords slice through the water towards him. However, just as the swords were about to pierce Shifeng's body, the dark blue crystal ball suddenly released a silver radiance. The swords flying at Shifeng immediately froze. At this moment, it looked as if time had come to a halt. A second later, the thousands of swords shattered like glass, the metal shards drifting to the floor. After which, a loud bang echoed throughout the space of the hall. Black cracks began to appear around the hall, and soon, the space inside the hall shattered as well. Along with the shattering of space, the stifling pressure Shifeng felt before also vanished, his body regaining its freedom. Damn! Damn! You actually dare spoil my business! Although this heaven-blessed individual has rejected me, I can still look for others. You cannot stop me forever. Meanwhile, this despicable heaven-blessed individual will die here. The will of the ancient god's rage grew, and even the hall trembled. The golden gate suddenly closed as the hall began to collapse. At this moment, as if having lost its power, the crystal ball darkened. It no longer released the astonishing cold as it had moments before. Although Shifeng did not know what was going on, when he heard the will claim that this heaven-blessed individual would die here, he knew what he needed to do. Escape! Shifeng immediately grabbed the dark blue crystal ball and placed it into his bag before activating Replace Doppelganger. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng appeared outside the pool. The doppelganger had only been 1 second away from disappearing when Shifeng activated Replace Doppelganger. It had truly been a close call. That was close. A second later and I would have been dead. Shifeng inwardly celebrated his escape as he watched the pool of water suddenly explode. Replace Doppelganger was truly a godlike escaping skill. Although Shifeng had come very close to losing his life, he also managed to obtain a treasure from his excursion into the pool. At the very least, he had not returned empty-handed. When Shifeng recalled the frightening might that the crystal ball had displayed, his heart pounded with excitement. The crystal ball could actually break the seal of the will of an ancient god. It was no ordinary treasure. With this thought, Shifeng impatiently opened his bag, wanting to investigate the dark blue crystal ball. Not even legendary items had such frightening abilities. However, when Shifeng tried to check the crystal ball's information, it revealed nothing. Shifeng then used omniscient eyes. To Shifeng's shock, however, the omniscient eyes, which could analyze even the destroyer of immortality, also revealed nothing. Moreover, Shifeng could not even touch the crystal ball now, as he instantly lost 1000 HP the moment he tried. Shifeng felt utterly helpless. He had no choice but to set aside this treasure for now. If he wanted to use this crystal ball, at the very least, he needed to raise his ice resistance to 100 or 200 points. Although Shifeng could not do anything about the dark blue crystal ball, the legacy book had a surprise for him. Indeed, just as Shifeng had guessed, the eternal courtyard where he could raise the legacy trial's completion rate. Now, instead of a 70% completion rate, the legacy book displayed a 92% completion rate. Shifeng had obtained an SS rank evaluation. Chapter 393 Blade Saint. Chapter 393 Blade Saint. SS rank was the highest evaluation achievable in a legacy trial. In the past, the legacy Shifeng had accepted was only a basic one. Even so, Shifeng had spent a lot of time and effort to achieve an A rank evaluation and obtain 7 legacy skill points. Now he that had an SS rank evaluation, he could obtain between 20 and 36 legacy skill points. The thought of so many legacy skill points alone was enough to excite Shifeng. Although Shifeng had not achieved 100% completion rate, he was very satisfied with this result. Now that he thought about it, the condition to achieve a 100% completion rate might have been submission to the god's will. Since he chose not to submit, this was probably the highest completion rate he could achieve. System: completion rate 92%. Do you wish to open the Book of Legacies and accept the legacy contained within? Without hesitation, Shifeng clicked Accept. The legacy book suddenly released a golden flash. The book then flipped open, and a purple ray of light shot out of the book and pierced Shifeng's forehead. The moment the purple light touched him, Shifeng felt his mind clear as if no secret in the world could hide from him. As the legacy book faded out of existence, Shifeng's body began to emit a faint and flickering purple glow. After the flickering continued for a few more seconds, the purple glow subsided, and Shifeng returned to normal. After successfully receiving the legacy, Shifeng felt his entire body brim with power. His mind was clear and unburdened as well. Right now, Shifeng was confident that he could face a Tier 1 Magic Knight without necessarily suffering defeat. Of course, that was if the Magic Knight did not possess so much HP. System: congratulations on obtaining one of the 10 Great Saint Legacies. Rewarding 20 free mastery points. System: congratulations on becoming a Tier 1 Blade Saint. Rewarding Blade Saint title. Blade Saint. All attributes plus 20. All resistances plus 15. Attack power increased by 15%. Attack speed increased by 20%. All attributes increased by 30%. Although Shifeng was still level 22, his strength had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. His base attack power alone exceeded 1,200 points, and his HP had reached 4,650 points. His HP even surpassed Tier 1 MTs now. Moreover, after being promoted to a Tier 1 class, players could receive 8 free attribute points with each level up, whereas Tier 0 classes would only receive 4 free attribute points. Shifeng also had the Abyssal Blade, which provided him with 2 additional free attribute points every time he leveled. The Golden Stigmata also increased all of his basic attributes by 5 points, and gave him 10 free attribute points with every increase in 5 levels. In other words, where other Tier 1 players would receive a total of 40 attribute points with each level up, Shifeng would receive a total of 85 points. Ordinary players could not compete with Shifeng. In addition, after completing his class change, Shifeng also gained 2 basic skills and 1 passive skill. Sword Dominator, passive skill. Can freely swap out sword-type weapons in both combat and non-combat states. Blade Dance, action type. Requires sword. Tier 1, Level 1, Proficiency 0/30,000. Allows simultaneous control of up to a maximum of 5 sword-type weapons for both attack and defense for 10 seconds. Each weapon has 80% user's strength and 50% user's damage. Range 40 yards. Cooldown 1 minute. Illusory Shadow, action type. Requires sword. Tier 1, Level 1, Proficiency 0/30,000. Upon activation, players' next 6 attacks cannot be blocked, and each attack will deal 40% attack damage. Cooldown 40 seconds. Shifeng was shocked upon reading these skills descriptions. The basic skills of the Blade Saint were already so powerful. Although Blade Dance was inferior to the Abyssal Blade's 9 Dragon Slash in terms of the number of weapons and burst damage, 9 Dragon Slash could only attack, not defend. Moreover, as the weapons summoned by 9 Dragon Slash were phantoms, they did not possess any impact force. However, Blade Dance was different. The 5 controlled weapons were tangible and possessed 80% of Shifeng's strength. This feature was far more valuable than just high damage. Through the consecutive attacks of the 5 swords, Shifeng could break his opponent's balance and create a gap in his opponent's defense. If Shifeng could not defend against an attack by himself, he could also use the 5 swords to boost his defense. Meanwhile, Illusory Shadow was even more amazing. It was perfect for PvP. In PvP 2 battles in God's Domain, when both sides were equally strong, the opponent would usually block over 90% of the attacks. However, if one side possessed an unblockable skill, it would upset the balance. It was especially true if Illusory Shadow were used when both sides were nearly dead. Such a trump card could determine the outcome of a battle. The Blade Saint is indeed worthy to be called one of the 10 Great Saint Legacies. If I use these skills in PvP, dealing with a Magic Knight with the same attributes as myself will be easy. After reading the descriptions of the Blade Saint's basic skills, strategies for future battles began to surface in Shifeng's mind. Originally, swordsman was a balanced class. Although swordsmen were not as durable as shield warriors or had the endurance of a guardian knights, the frightening power of berserkers, the long-range capabilities of rangers, or the burst damage and dexterity of assassins, the class didn't have any shortcomings. The class was just as strong, or just as weak, against all other classes. Meanwhile, the Blade Saint was simply the enhanced version of the swordsman. Every aspect of a swordsman had increased. It was probably the most formidable class in God's domain. Following which, Shifeng called up the system interface. There was now a new tab called Legacy Skills Menu in the system menu. Selecting this tab, the Legacy Skill menu that appeared reported that Shifeng had 31 legacy skill points available, as well as plenty of skills that he could learn. There were over 100 skills listed in the menu. However, there were only 6 Tier 1 skills Shifeng could learn right now, and 2 legacy skill points were required to unlock a Tier 1 basic legacy skill. Meanwhile, among these 6 Tier 1 skills, there were 2 that made Shifeng's eyes shine. One of them was Skywheel Sword, the other was Blade Liberation. Skywheel Sword action type. Requires sword. Tier 1, Level 1, Proficiency 0/30, 000. Inflicts 1000 base damage plus 200% attack damage to all enemies within 20 by 20 yard. Also seals all enemies within range, preventing them from leaving the area for 4 seconds. Cooldown, 1 minute 20 seconds. Blade Liberation action type. Requires sword. Tier 1, Level 1, Proficiency 0/30, 000. Grants player unparalleled strength for 20 seconds. Effect obtained varies based on the weapon's unlocked potential. After the duration, player is weakened. All attributes decrease by 80% for 3 minutes. Cooldown, 10 hours. Skywheel Sword was one of the extremely rare AoE control skills. Whether it was used in PvP or PvE2, it was indispensable. Meanwhile, Blade Liberation belonged to the Super Burst skill category. It could be a trump card when Shifeng was in a desperate situation. It was also indispensable. However, when Shifeng saw the points required to unlock these 2 skills, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air and very nearly cursed. Skywheel Sword required 10 points to unlock, while Blade Liberation required an astonishing 20 points. With the total points these 2 skills demanded, Shifeng could learn 10 basic class skills. However, these high requirements also made Shifeng aware of just how extraordinary Blade Liberation was. For an AoE control skill such as the Skywheel Sword, the demand of 10 legacy skill points was not odd. However, Blade Liberation needed twice that amount to unlock. With 20 legacy skill points, Shifeng could even learn a Tier 3 class skill. Chapter 394 Times have changed. Chapter 394 Times have changed. The Legacy Trial had given him a total of 31 legacy skill points. Anyone would hesitate over spending 30 points on only 2 skills. However, Shifeng did not. With his mind made up, Shifeng clicked to learn both Skywheel Sword and Blade Liberation. Suddenly, his stock of legacy skill points plummeted to 1. To an expert in God's domain, nothing was more important than a powerful skill. A powerful Tier 1 skill had a lot of versatility, so it was not easy to master. However, if mastered, it would not be surprising if a player's combat power increased by severalfold. As the saying went, a bird in the hand was worth 2 in the bush. Although Shifeng could learn more skills if he spent the 30 legacy skill points on less costly skills, the skills he learned would not contribute as much to his overall combat power. During dangerous moments, in particular, the Super Burst skill, Blade Liberation, would be far more useful than a dozen other ordinary Tier 1 skills. After learning the 2 class skills, Shifeng used the return scroll and teleported back to White River City. At this moment, White River City buzzed with activity. Overwhelming Smile's high-priced poaching had boosted White River City's development. A flood of independent players had migrated to White River City with the intention of joining Overwhelming Smile. Based on the statistics offered by the official game developers, the player population in White River City had exceeded 3 million. White River City was now the most populated city in Star Moon Kingdom's eastern region. It was also the third most populated city throughout Star Moon Kingdom. Looking at this situation, Shifeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Originally, he had intended to make White River City the most popular city in Star Moon Kingdom. After all, Zero Wings Guild residence was in White River City, so it had the home field advantage here. However, he never thought an enemy like Overwhelming Smile would actually help him achieve that plan. Fate truly knew how to toy with people. If Feng Xianyan, the mastermind behind this situation, knew Shifeng's thoughts right now, he would most likely pop a vein or two out of anger. However, Shifeng also could not help but admit that Feng Xuanyang's plan of desperately throwing money away was very effective. Currently, Overwhelming Smile had become the undisputed #1 guild in White River City. The branch guild in White River City already had over 80,000 members. Among them, there were also quite a few elite players. Compared to the other guilds in White River City, Overwhelming Smile was far superior. Moreover, during this period, Overwhelming Smile had continuously raided large-scale dungeons around White River City. As if they were on steroids, Overwhelming Smile's raiding speed far surpassed Gentle Snow's team. They were on completely different levels. In addition, Overwhelming Smile had also offered to purchase information regarding reputation quests at a high price, apparently intending to become the second guild in White River City to own a guild residence. In contrast, Zero Wing showed no signs of movement at all. The guild's member count held steady around 20,000. If not for the high-level quests and double EXP buff available from the guild residence, most of Zero Wing's members would have long since defected to Overwhelming Smile. Brother Feng, you're finally out. Have you completed your class change? Not long after Shifeng returned to White River City, Blackie contacted him. Yeah. How has the guild been recently? Shifeng asked, not bothering to discuss his new class. What do you think? The entire guild has been spiritless these past few days, and everyone is just focusing on quests. Many in the guild have also started complaining and asking why the core team hasn't moved against Overwhelming Smile yet. Overwhelming Smile's suppression has them feeling resentful. Moreover, those Overwhelming Smile bastards have also started ridiculing Zero Wing publicly, claiming that we're all bark and no bite. Blackie said, feeling slightly indignant. Brother Feng, since you've returned, why don't we start raiding a level 20 large-scale dungeon and show those punks from Overwhelming Smile's Zero Wing's strength? Currently, the level 20 dungeons in White River City were only 10 and 20-man team dungeons. However, in the 50-man large-scale team dungeon, Sarek Dungeon, Overwhelming Smile had not managed to even meet the first boss of normal mode before suffering a team wipe. Meanwhile, if Zero Wing could obtain the first clear of Sarek Castle, it would rain on Overwhelming Smile's parade. Not only would it extinguish their arrogance, but it would also increase Zero Wing's reputation. As for whether or not they could actually raid Sarek Castle, Blackie didn't doubt their success. Others might not realize how strong Zero Wing's core team was, but Blackie was well aware. Moreover, with Shifeng around, it would be a simple task to clear the level 20 large-scale team dungeon, Sarek Castle. How many people in the guild have completed their class change? Shifeng agreed with Blackie's plan, but Sarek Castle was not easy to dominate. There are 39 members who have completed their class change. Among them, Sister Aqua was the first to obtain her Tier 1 class, while Sister Fire Dance was second. Blackie said, a hint of fear surfacing in his eyes as he said, class change. He had never expected that the class change quest would be so difficult. If not for the fact that he possessed the epic rank staff, Mavis's Guard, he might not have completed the quest. Fortunately, he passed his class change and obtained an A-rank evaluation. While he waited for Shifeng's return, he had familiarized himself with the combat style of a Tier 1 class. Precisely because the class change quest was not simple, many core members of Zero Wing had failed it. As these members had to wait a few days before they could challenge the quest again. Moreover, as everyone had been busy with their respective class change quests, the levels of Zero Wing's core members had fallen behind. Now, Zero Wing no longer occupied all of the top 100 spots on the White River City ranking list. Others had even claimed a few of the top 10 ranks. This had been a huge blow to Zero Wing's morale and reputation. 39? Not bad. Once we have more than 50, I guess we can make a trip to Sarah Castle, Sherfone said with a faint smile. In truth, he was somewhat surprised by Blackie's report. In the past, even when most players were around level 24 to 25, most guilds in White River City had not had more than 20 Tier 1 players. Currently, the average player in White River City was only around 18 to 19. Yet, Zero Wing already possessed 39 Tier 1 players. Although part of this reason was that Sherfone had leaked some information about the strategy to challenge a few basic class changes, the number of players that had succeeded was still astonishing. The difference in combat power between Tier 1 players and Tier 0 players was like the difference between heaven and earth. It was not something that could be measured by levels. Regarding the White River City ranking list, ever since Zero Wing's guild residence had been established, Sherfone no longer troubled himself with it. After all, the future was the era of high-tiered players, not high-level players. Brother Phone, do you really mean it? Blackie suddenly grew excited. During this period, the oppression he had suffered from those bastards and overwhelming smile frustrated him. Look at how excited you are. Of course, I mean it. However, I still have something I need to attend to right now. For now, have everyone familiarized themselves with the combat style of their Tier 1 classes? Sherfone said, chuckling. Although everyone had already evolved to a Tier 1 class, the freedom a Tier 1 class possessed had also become much higher. If players could not properly adapt and display their strength, their combat power would not improve much. Okay. Leave it to me. I'll let everyone know, Blackie said excitedly before disconnecting the call. He then proceeded to contact those who had already changed classes. Meanwhile, Sherfone took a look at the time, noticing that he still had quite some time before his appointment with Gentle Snow. He then retrieved Celiora's communication crystal from his bag. The Grandmaster Forger had given him this item herself, and it allowed him to contact Celiora at any time. Previously, Sherfone had helped Celiora become a Grandmaster Forger, resulting in Celiora's favorability towards him to increase greatly. Moreover, in order to search for materials to produce an epic item, Celiora had gone on a journey. Sherfone had obtained the forging design for the epic ranked broken steel set equipment back in the Origin Sword domain. However, if he had to forge an epic item by himself, who knew how long it would be before he could achieve such a feat? Since he had a connection with a Grandmaster Forger, why not use it? Chapter 395 Broken Steel Legacy Set Equipment. Chapter 395 Broken Steel Legacy Set Equipment. Sherfone then used the communication crystal to contact Celiora. Hello, Miss Celiora. I am Yifone. I have something I would like your help with. I wonder if you have any time to spare right now? Sherfone carefully asked. Ultimately, his current status was far from comparable to Celiora's. Although they had a good relationship, basic courtesy was still required if he wished to ask her for a favor. Oh, it's you. I'm very busy right now, so make it quick. Although Celiora did not immediately reject him, she still did not show any sign of interest. To Celiora, nothing was more important than collecting epic-ranked forging materials right now. If not for the favor she owed Sherfone, she would have directly rejected his request, instead of taking the time to listen to him. Sherfone was aware of this point. After all, he was extremely familiar with Celiora's personality, someone who was wholeheartedly focused on forging, without the slightest bit of interest in anything else. This was also why she had managed to become a Grandmaster Forger at such a young age. Sherfone then chuckled and said, I have a forging design for an epic set equipment. What? Epic set equipment? Celiora's eyes suddenly shone. She hurriedly demanded, Why didn't you say so earlier? Meet me at my smithy right away. Sherfone shook his head and laughed when he heard Celiora's impatient tone. To NPCs, epic-ranked forging designs, much less a forging design for an epic set equipment, were extremely rare. It was the dream of countless forgers to produce a set of epic equipment. Meanwhile, to players, epic ranked forging designs were much more difficult to obtain. In the past, Shadow had only managed to get a few pieces. As for epic set equipment forging designs, Shifeng had only heard about them occasionally, and had never personally seen one himself. In God's domain, set equipment were half a rank stronger than discrete equipment of the same rank. In other words, the quality of an epic set equipment was above that of epic equipment, but below that of fragmented legendary equipment. To players who could not get their hands on fragmented legendary equipment, epic set equipment was the best equipment available. In this life, Shifeng was truly fortunate to have obtained the forging design for an epic set equipment. Half an hour later, Shifeng arrived at Siliora's smithy in a horse carriage. At this moment, the door to her smithy was still shut tight, and it did not seem she planned to do business at all. Shifeng walked over and knocked on the door. The thick wooden door then slowly opened, and a surge of scorching air rushed out of the house. In the next moment, Siliora walked out from within before quickly dragging Shifeng into the house. Despite having not seen each other for some time, Siliora looked exactly the same, still fully garbed in black leather clothing. That large V-shaped collar revealed her snow-white skin. Her black leather pants tightly hugged her slender legs. Siliora currently exuded an enchanting charm. "Hurry up and let me see it!" Siliora pushed Shifeng against the table, her body very nearly sticking to his. Her eyes shone with excitement as she spoke, failing to notice how lethal her impure actions were. Although Shifeng had long since gotten used to Siliora's personality in his past life, his heart still raced involuntarily every time they met. "Here it is." Shifeng calmed down somewhat, and retrieved the broken steel forging design from his bag. Broken steel set equipment. Epic rank unique set equipment. 6-piece set consisting of broken steel gauntlets, broken steel breastplate, broken steel helmet, broken steel leg guards, broken steel boots, broken steel bracers. Equipment requirement: Strength 1000, Agility 1200, Sword-related Mastery 350. Class restriction: Blade Saint. Originally, Shifeng had thought he could equip this broken steel set equipment immediately. However, 1000 points in strength and 1200 points in agility were definitely not achievable by players below level 30. At the very least, one needed to be above level 50 to possess such attributes. Meanwhile, the materials required to produce this set equipment were 12 pieces of Eternium, 300 mana stones, 1000 pieces of Titan ore, 12 fire source crystals, 12 water source crystals, 12 wind source crystals, 12 earth source crystals, and 1 nucleus of life. The person who drew this design must be insane. Is he trying to make a legendary item? Siliora gaped in shock after inspecting the forging design. Not to mention Siliora's, even Shifeng's heart was beating madly right now. He, too, was dumbfounded by the description. Shifeng had previously been caught up in his joy over becoming a Blade Saint. Moreover, he knew it was impossible for him to produce the broken steel set equipment by himself and to gather the materials required to make the set. Hence, although Shifeng had long since completed the broken steel forging design, he never actually bothered to take a look at it. As for the reason why Shifeng had come looking for Siliora this time, he simply wished to know how confident she was in producing the set equipment. That way, he could make appropriate preparations for it. However, after seeing the forging materials required, Shifeng immediately dismissed his previous thoughts of making preparations. Just collecting a single set of materials was nigh impossible, not to mention collecting a second set. Previously, Shifeng had spent hundreds of gold just to produce 21 mana stones. Now, the set equipment actually required 300 mana stones. That was a few thousand gold, at least. However, even if he did manage to obtain the 300 mana stones, Eternium was something much rarer and more precious than even mana stones. Countless master forgers dreamt of obtaining even just one piece. Yet, the set actually needed 12 to produce. Titan ore was also a considerably high-class rare ore. At this stage of the game, nobody was capable of mining such an ore yet. As for the elemental source crystals, they were all materials highly sought after by master alchemists. Their preciousness and rarity were not one bit lower than Eternium. Meanwhile, the most inconceivable thing was that the broken steel set equipment actually required a nucleus of life. The value of that item far surpassed even the water of life, and it was something that could only be found with luck. Miss Celiora, if you have the materials, how confident are you in making it? Sherfong asked. Originally, he had already planned on giving up on producing the broken steel set equipment. However, after giving it some thought, he still chose to inquire. You really have the materials? Celiora's expression immediately changed upon hearing Sherfeng's words. Her gaze as she looked at Sherfeng was as if she were looking at a 7 luminaries crystal mountain, and she beamed at him as if saying, Tycoon, let's be friends. I was only asking. Sherfeng smiled bitterly, shaking his head. Even if he sold everything in his possession right now, including himself, he still wouldn't be able to gather all the required materials. Around 20%. If you give me more time to practice, I can raise it to 30%. Celiora rolled her eyes at Sherfeng, feeling slightly disappointed. However, her interest in producing the broken steel set equipment still burned brightly. 30%? Sherfeng had also made his own estimations before. It would be extremely fortunate if Celiora could have a 20% success rate. Most likely, only a few NPC Grandmaster Forgers could actually achieve a 30% success rate. As for players, even if Sherfeng waited until someone became a Grandmaster Forger, these players would have around a 10% success rate, at most. I'll have to trouble Miss Celiora then. I will try my best to collect the materials required. Since you have entrusted this task to me, I will continuously research this forging design, while you gather the materials. As for the cost of making it, I won't charge you anything if it is unsuccessful, Celiora said happily. In God's domain, one needed to pay an exorbitant labor fee when commissioning a forger, be they players or NPCs, of master rank and above to produce an item, regardless of the final result. Now, however, Celiora offered not to charge him should she fail. It could be seen just how happy Celiora was right now. System: Celiora's favorability towards you has increased by 100. Currently, Sherfeng was in no hurry to produce the broken steel set equipment. After all, even if it was produced, he did not possess the attributes needed to equip it. In order to do so, he needed to be above level 50 at the very least. During this period, he could slowly gather the required materials. Following which, Sherfeng left the broken steel forging design at Celiora's place to allow her to properly study it. He then hailed another carriage and hurried to the location he had agreed to meet Gentle Snow at. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.